Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 25th part of What If Deku had Psychokinesis. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 25, and the winner is Bakugou Katsuki is out of bounds. Midoriya Izuku advances to the finals. Izuku. Ga. Catch her. Mr. and Mrs. Uraraka rushed over to grab Inko by the arms as she, for the fifth or sixth time in the past few minutes, fell out of her chair. This time, however, fresh tears were gushing everywhere, threatening to wash the married couple away as they tried to keep her off the ground. My poor baby. He looks so hurt. While the two tried to help calm her down, reminding her that UA had recovery girl, Eri looked up from her pile of candy, given to her throughout the match to distract her from some of the more brutal moments of the fight, and clapped, "Yay, Izuku won. He beat that mean-looking bad guy. Mrs. Midoriya, you don't have to cry anymore. My poor baby. She keeps this up and we're gonna get flooded out of the suite. Dear." All Might patted Eri on the head and glanced over at Inko, who was back in her seat and still crying. He stood up and leaned over the railing so he could look out to the field. Down below, both Izuku and a reluctant and combative Katsuki were getting loaded up onto gurneys and taken off the field. They weren't even through the gate when Cementos, along with several field workers, started repairing all the damage, starting with putting out several grass fires. All Might had a feeling that this match was going to be something else. He might not be fully aware of the history between Izuku and Katsuki, but he wasn't a complete fool, despite what Recovery Girl and Aizawa would lead others to believe. He could piece together what was there. Katsuki had clearly been the one Izuku had been talking about when he went to talk to him after the sludge villain incident. Izuku had tried to be vague when talking about it, using friend then quickly adding a S. Or letting slip a him before trying to cover with a them. Izuku and Katsuki, from their records, had been going to the same schools since they were little. In many ways, Katsuki was a large contributing factor in Izuku's stunted quirk growth. Izuku may not be one to hate, but that didn't mean the boy wouldn't have some kind of grudge. And Katsuki was extremely competitive, seeing someone he thought as weak suddenly outperforming him in class was bound to get under his skin. So even before the fight had started, All Might knew this match was going to be explosive, in more ways than one. Still, Izuku had persevered. Against odds stacked against him, with overall power and terrain in Katsuki's favor, Izuku had used cunning and grit and displayed a level of control over his quirk that had honestly left All Might stunned. The power he displayed in that Delaware Smash move, a name that All Might chuckled at, but still approved of after hearing Izuku's scream all the way up here, was something else. Then there was that barrier that Izuku had deployed, a technique that opened up so many possibilities and showed Izuku's ingenuity. Izuku had put all his chips on the table and had come out with a win and earned himself a place in the finals against Shudo. All Might, however, couldn't help but worry, though. Izuku really had gone all in on this fight. He might have won, but he had also clearly gotten the worst of it. Katsuki's explosions were no joke, and the myriad of burns and other injuries Izuku had taken were not to be ignored. Then, of course, there was the kickback of overusing his quirk. Izuku might not have been lifting his weight limit, but throwing a couple of tons of rock and concrete must have been an extremely taxing feat. The amount of blood coming from Izuku's nose did look alarming, but it was what came after the nosebleeds that he was concerned about. All Might knew about the concussions that Izuku could get if he pushed himself too hard. He couldn't tell from the sweat, and exhaustion could hide the symptoms, but it was possible he had hit that stage already. Recovery Girl would be able to heal him up, of course. Whether she could do it in time for the final match was the question. Would Izuku be in any condition to continue? He knew Recovery Girl would get Izuku in the best physical shape she could, but how much energy would he have left after that? It was a fine balance, healing Izuku's injuries while leaving him coherent enough to continue on. If he was too exhausted from the treatment, Recovery Girl would not let him continue. All Might knew he could try and push the issue if it came down to it, but the thought left a bad taste in his mouth. It was true, he wanted Izuku to win, but not at the expense of his health and safety. But he also knew that he had to pass on one for all, sooner rather than later. He hadn't told Izuku he planned to pass the quirk onto him if he won. There was no reason to add that weight onto the boy's shoulders. It's not like young Midoriya hasn't displayed exactly what I was looking for today. His control and power of his quirk has been Amazon. His tactical planning and leadership skills in the second event were exactly what you see in heroes aiming for the top. And his and young Uraraka's victory at the start was awe-inspiring. In so many ways, Izuku had done exactly what All Might wanted, and then some. Would beating Shido really go to show him anything else? He was conflicted. Part of him felt like Izuku had done enough at this point, but the other half still wanted more. Izuku was his successor, of that, there was no doubt. One for All was Izuku's by right at this point. He just had to reach out and take it. Winning this last match would be doing just that. All Might knew Izuku must be feeling the effect of his matches, but he had to grit his teeth and keep going if he wanted to win. Plus Ultra. That mindset would be what Izuku needed to win, now and in the future. It's the mindset All Might had been living ever since he had become a hero. Was it fair to expect less from Izuku? To question his resolve he had shown up till now? No. I will believe in young Midoriya and stick to the plan. His feelings and mindset, All Might returned to his set. Though one more thought did enter his head. He had to wonder just what One for All would do to Izuku. While the students of 1A made their way back to their seats, many were still talking about the match Izuku and Katsuki just had. Ochako tried not to think about it too much. Her own feelings over the whole subject were twisting up her insides. The smile she wore was starting to fray at the edges, though she was lucky everyone was too busy talking amongst themselves to really notice her. At least, almost everyone. When she suddenly found her arm grabbed, Ochako looked up in alarm. Not sure what was going on. She was even more surprised when she saw it was Tsuyu holding onto her and pulling her away from the group. Ah! Tsuyu ignored her and kept pulling her along, with Himiko right behind. Yeah, no talking right now. Wait, what's going on? Yuga blinked, noticing them breaking away. Mademoiselles? Our mezzanine is this way. We're just gonna take a quick restroom break. Himiko winced at the almost parody answer she gave. Yuga rubbed his chin. To powder your noses. I understand. Deciding to just roll with it, and not wonder just what Yuga thought they were doing, Himiko hurried after Tsuyu and Ochako. I swear, that boy is way more observant than he lets on. Rounding a corner, and feeling like they now had some privacy, Tsuyu finally let Ochako go. Sorry, Uraraka, but I thought we should have some privacy. Guys, what's going on? Ochako asked, completely confused. Yeah, I'd like to know, too, Mei added, making Himiko jump and turn around. Wait, when did you get here? Mei shrugged. I figured I should see what has my new friends all concerned. I guess it has something to do with Uraraka looking all grumpy. Ochako blinked. Wait, grumpy? I'm not grumpy. Bullshit. Himiko answered immediately with Tsuyu nodding along. Guys, really, I'm fine. Himiko pointed at Ochako. You think so? Those eyes you were throwing at Bakugou sure as hell didn't make you look fine. Ochako flinched and turned away. I wasn't. Those were dangerous eyes, Ochako. And honestly, they don't suit you. Tsuyu stepped in. Uraraka, please don't keep this inside. We're your friends. We know something is wrong. Let us help, Karo. Ochako looked at her friends, and could see they were worried about her. Finally, she relented. She told them about the conversation she had overheard between Izuku and Katsuki after their first day of class, and how that made her concerned that Izuku would go back to Katsuki. Then, she brought up what she saw just now, with Katsuki calling Izuku his rival and just how happy that seemed to make him. And now, her greatest worry looked like it was coming true. Himiko frowned deeply and crossed her arms. Okay, so I have a way to insta-fix this. No stabbing, Karo. Himiko threw up her hand. Fine, I'll settle for slicing. No. Himiko glowered at Tsuyu. You're going to go with the boring option, aren't you? Fine. Ochako tilted her head to the side. Boring option? Tsuyu, ignoring the pouting Himiko, turned back to look at Ochako. Uraraka, these are some pretty big fears you have. Have you ever talked with Midoriya about any of this? Ochako flinched. No, I haven't. Mei looked confused. Wait, aren't you two like the bestest of friends or something? Shouldn't this have been something you brought to his attention, like, right away? Ochako could exactly argue that Mei's logic made a lot of sense, but she tried anyway since it's what she had been doing for so long. I wanted Deku to do this himself. To get out of Bakugou's shadow and move on. It's what he wanted too. Toga, you heard him. He wanted to use today to put Bakugou behind him. Tsuyu looked at her friend, not liking how twisted up Ochako seemed to be. Midoriya did win today. I'd say he did accomplish his goal. I didn't hear what he said after we left, but he wasn't jumping out of his bed to accept it. Did he say anything to you about it, Uraraka? Ochako thought back to their brief talk before Recovery Girl chased her out. Not really. He was just happy. Happy he won? Himiko asked. Ochako nodded. Tsuyu tapped her chin. Then this whole issue might be something completely new altogether then. Bakugou calling Midoriya his rival does change their dynamic. So it also changes their issues. Chewing on that for a bit, Ochako was slow to give a response. With a quiet opening, Mei coughed into her hand. So, I get I'm the new girl here and probably don't have the best understanding of whatever all this drama is, but don't you think this is something you should be talking to Midoriya about? I mean, Azui dash. Call me Tsu. Tsu said it herself. These are some pretty serious fears you got. Wouldn't the best way to deal with them be to talk to the source of the issues? I don't think this is something you should be keeping to yourself. Not really. Himiko rolled her eyes. Would you be talking about it at all if Tsu hadn't grabbed you and dragged you here? Himiko nodded. Exactly. Look, like I said, I don't really get everything that's going on. I get the feeling there's gonna be some homework I'm gonna have to catch up on, but this shouldn't be something you keep from Midoriya. I'm sure he'd want to know that you're this worried about him. Can I just add, Himiko cut in, that if the crazy baby maker girl here can see that, you don't really have an excuse, Ochako. Ochako sighed and caught herself from repeating an old habit as she pinched the hem of her seat top. I guess, I'm worried what that conversation will end up being like. I don't want to get into a fight with Deku over Bakugou. Uraraka, you and Midoriya are best friends. Being that close to someone must mean you trust him, and he trusts you. Maybe you two might argue over it, but I think more than likely he'll listen to you, Karo. And even if you two don't end up agreeing over this, it's not going to ruin anything. You two are too close for that. Tsu's right, Himiko added. Keeping secrets from your friends is never a good idea. Pointing between the two of them, and giving Ochako a knowing smirk, case in point. Those, Ochako thought, were some compelling arguments and points. Plus, just the thought that her worries for Izuku could fester like they had for Himiko was chilling. She would never want to get into a fight like that with Izuku. I guess you guys are probably right. Maybe I do need to talk to Deku about this finally. He was able to accomplish his goal today. I can't just silently watch as Bakugou drags him back down. No one's saying you have to do it right now, so you said, but this is something that you should do sooner rather than later. And don't forget, you aren't the only one looking after Izuku. Himiko reminded, smirking at Ochako who nodded. I guess that's a benefit of having a good group of friends. We can all look out for each other. When his classmates started to return to their seats, Shudo watched them carefully. He hadn't gone with them to check on Izuku. He wasn't sure if being part of that crowd would have been appropriate, given he was supposed to face Izuku in their upcoming match. While he was curious about his condition after such an intense match against Katsuki, he didn't want to come off as getting any kind of unfair advantage seeing how and where his opponent was injured. Judging by his classmates' normally high spirits, it looked like, at the very least, Izuku was expected to make a full recovery. As soon as more of his classmates returned, he started to overhear a conversation between them. So how do you think Todoroki is gonna beat Midoriya? Denki asked. Dude, don't go counting Midoriya out yet, Ijiru countered. He just proved how manly he was after beating Dash.
Growling. Air, surviving Bakugou. At this point, I'd say it's an even split. Really?
Rikido asked. Even if you don't take into consideration the side effects of Recovery Girl healing him, he'd be exhausted just from the fights he's been in.
Yeah, Midoriya's tough, sure, but even he has to have limits. Ijiru waved them off. How do you know Midoriya doesn't have some elaborate plan, though?
Katsuki growled as he stomped by. I swear to God, if you keep singing Deku's fucking praises, I'm going to kill you. But think about it, guys.
Midoriya could take Todoroki's ice and dash.
Hey, Hitoshi interrupted. Maybe wait until Todoroki isn't here before you start talking about things Midoriya could do.
Ijiru looked over at Shudo. Or do you want me to let both Uraraka and Toga know you did it again?
Paling, Ijiru quickly found his seat while Shudo got up from his. I'm going to go wait in the waiting rooms.
Hitoshi frowned. I wasn't saying you had to leave.
Shudo brushed by the class as he started to walk away. I don't need the distraction.
He paused briefly to look back at Katsuki, who frowned up at him. What? Ignoring Katsuki, Shudo left.
As he walked down the hall, he thought back to Ijiru's comment.
Some elaborate plan. Shudo couldn't deny that it wasn't impossible that Izuku had some plan to face him. Given time, he could be dangerous.
The first time he had seen Izuku fight, in All Might S-Class, it had been clear Izuku was a planner. And just now against Katsuki, Izuku had clearly had a plan to make sure he won.
It was a concerning issue.
Making his way further down the hall, the sound of footsteps made Shudo briefly stop thinking of his upcoming match. Mei, Tsuyu, Himiko and Ochako all passed by Shudo without a word, though Shudo was very aware of the cold look Ochako was giving him.
Shudo made it a few more feet before Ochako turned and looked back at him. If you want to win, don't hold back.
Ochako's voice was sharp and cold. When Shudo turned around to look at her, she had already walked off.
Don't hold back. Shudo tightened his left fist before he continued on his way.
After a final smooch, Recovery Girl pulled back and examined her patient sitting on his bed. Izuku was in fresh gym clothes now. He still had some bandages around the cuts that Recovery Girl had left alone after some basic first aid. Most of her work had gone into his burns, of which there were many. She had also spent some time making sure his head was okay. While her quick concussion check had been negative, she could tell his bell had Besson rung hard enough from his quirk to get close. Very, very close. She had fixed that up as best as she could but made sure to warn Izuku that if he went overboard right away, he could very well hit that concussion a lot quicker than normal.
Now young man, remember.
Effectively your buffer is gone until you are able to get an actual good night's rest.
Go too hard, and you'll skip the headaches at the very least.
At worst you'll give yourself a concussion before you know what happened.
Izuku smiled brightly. I understand. Thank you for everything. Recovery Girl eyed Izuku before turning and going to her desk. I'm sure you do. Just stay in that bed until you're called to the ring. You can also stay here instead of the waiting room.
I'll give the judges a call to let them know you passed my medical evaluation.
Thank you again.
With that settled, Izuku let himself lay back on the bed and let his mind drift to the three issues he had on his plate. The most pressing at the moment was of course his match with Shudo and all the baggage that came with that. The baggage in particular making any plan to face the other boy a real challenge as different feelings battled against each other in his heart and head.
Next was whatever relationship he had with Katsuki now.
He had accomplished what he had set out to do. He had settled things and moved on from his past.
Accepting that the friendship he once had with Katsuki wasn't coming back.
He wasn't chasing after Katsuki anymore, nor was he lost in the other boy's shadow. A place he had to make sure he never fell back into. He had friends that respected him, and he didn't have to worry or fear any of them becoming abusive towards him. In fact, everything had worked out exactly as he had hoped. Not only had he moved on, but Katsuki acknowledged it as well. Not only that, but by calling Izuku his rival, he had openly admitted that he had passed him. Katsuki was chasing after him now.
So while their past friendship was settled and done, this new dynamic opened up many new opportunities.
The thought made him happy, but cautiously so. Izuku wasn't going to lie to himself and say that Katsuki calling him a rival hadn't been something he had hoped would happen. But even if they had a new dynamic, Katsuki was still Katsuki. Even if some of the things he had said and done recently had been very unlike him. So whatever this new thing they had was, he wasn't just going to jump in without being ready for it to turn sour. At the very least, he owed himself that. The third and final issue that was giving Izuku trouble, and that had only just crossed his mind, was a possibly bigger issue.
Katsuki had clearly eavesdropped on his and Shuto's very private conversation,
during which the fact that he had a connection to All Might was brought up.
Out loud. For anyone, including eavesdroppers, to hear.
I swear, I am horrible at keeping secrets.
At this point I'm going to blurt it out in front of the whole class. At the very least Kaken isn't one to gossip. Maybe it's for the best I don't bring it up at all. If he doesn't, there's no reason to do it either. Of course this happens when Kaken calls me his rival. Nothing's ever simple. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, Izuku groaned. All of these issues had to take a back seat. Right now he had to focus on Shuto. But again, he was finding himself split. No matter how much he tried to plan on how to face him, Izuku's mind went in two different directions. He wanted to win, of course. He wanted to beat Shuto and win the sports festival. Yet, at the same time, Izuku couldn't get the look on Shuto's face out of his mind, when he told him about how he grew up and the effect it was having on him now. Seeing Shuto look like that, Izuku's instincts screamed at him to do one simple thing. Save him. I wish I knew what to do. What would All Might do? Wait, I could just ask him. Oh shoot, I don't have my phone with me though. Sitting up, Izuku looked over at Recovery Girl as she put her phone away. Recovery Girl. Could I borrow your phone? I suppose, but you should be focused on getting as much rest as you can right now. Who are you calling anyway? I'd like to call All Might. There's something I want. Izuku paused as he collected his thoughts. There's something I need to ask him. Recovery Girl looked at Izuku for a second before walking over and handing him her phone. Just make sure it's quick. I want you to get all the rest you can. They pretty much have everything fixed already, so they'll be calling you both to your waiting rooms soon. Though you'll be staying here for that. Thanking her, Izuku took the phone and quickly punched in All Might's number. After it rung a few times, Izuku heard what sounded like hurried shuffling and a door closing before All Might's voice came through in a hushed, rushed whisper. Recovery Girl? What is it? Is everything alright? They just announced young Midoriya was cleared to compete. Is something the matter? All Might, it's me. Sorry, I had to borrow Recovery Girl's phone. I'm fine by the way. Young Midoriya? All Might let out a long breath. I swear you're going to give me a heart attack one of these days. What can I do for you? Shouldn't you be resting up? I needed to ask you something. Oh? What would that be? If you're looking for tips on how to deal with young Todoroki, I'm afraid I can't help you there. I'm his teacher now too after all. All Might ended that last bit with a chuckle. Izuku frowned. While he wasn't asking for that exactly, Shuto was the subject of the call. Even if he wasn't going to outright say it, that's not really what I wanted to ask you. All Might, Izuku took a breath. What's more important? Winning or saving? Recovery Girl looked up from her desk, while All Might paused for a few seconds on the other end of the line. Young Midoriya, what do you mean by that? I mean, if you had to decide on what to do, winning a fight or saving someone. What would you say you would do? On the other end of the call, All Might kept quiet as he thought over Izuku's words, and why now of all times was Izuku asking him this kind of question? Not before his first couple matches. Not before his match with Katsuki, knowing that those two did have a rough history. No, Izuku was asking this now before his match with Shuto. A boy he was aware had some issues with his own quirk and family. Young Midoriya, Does this have anything to do with young Todoroki? I mean, I'm not really talking specifics. Aha! Specifics that you won't talk about, I guess. Izuku flinched and kept quiet.
Which All Might took as an obvious admission.
Then let me ask you this, before I answer your question. When you say winning or saving. For you, right now, that means either winning the sports festival, or somehow helping young Todoroki. Don't you?
Yes. There was a long sigh. You just can't have a normal sports festival, can you?
You have to go make things complicated.
Izuku chuckled. In my defense, Todoroki was the one that made things complicated.
He actually thought I was your kid.
Recovery Girl almost fell out of her seat, while All Might on the other end started coughing. He what?
Why would he think that? Well. Izuku quickly listed off the logic Shido had laid out for him, and All Might rubbed his brow. Okay, I guess if you look at everything cynically like that, I can, I suppose given that, it makes some sense why he's confronted you. Since he's supposed to surpass me. Izuku's eyes went wide. Wait, you know about that?
Let's just say, Endeavor and I have run into each other recently. And he mentioned his son was going to be the one to surpass me. If he's preaching that to his boy too.
Well, it just fits. Yeah. I suppose it does.
All Might ran a hand through his hair, so now we have two people that we haven't fooled completely, I guess.
I imagine he's also figured out I've trained you at least. Izuku blinked. 2? Oh, yeah, Aizawa put 2 and 2 together. We had a talk about it.
Oh, boy.
Don't worry about it. We talked and things shouldn't affect you one way or another for now.
And it's only about the training, he is not aware of one for all. Still a little concerning that we're only a couple of weeks into the year and we have a couple of people getting close. I don't remember it being that hard to keep a secret back when I was at UA.
It might be more than just them. Aizawa-sensei and Todoroki, I mean. Kaken overheard Todoroki and me talking. I don't know what exactly he overheard, but... All Might started chuckling. Young Bakugou? Oh my god, we are bad at this. I don't think Kaken will talk about it. He's not a gossiper and he's just as big a fan of you as I am. So he won't do anything. We do not tell young Uraraka how bad we've been. Agreed? Agreed.
Both laughed, happy at least one out of the three seemed capable of keeping a secret. All Might soon stopped and decided to get back to the reason for the call. Young Midoriya. You asked me what I would do if put in a situation where I either had to win or save someone.
Do you want my honest answer? Please. I wouldn't choose. I would do both. I would win and save. Izuku blinked, not expecting that kind of answer at all. Both?
Recovery Girl groaned and rubbed her brow. Of course.
Young Midoriya, there are heroes that win the day by saving people. There are heroes that save people by winning the day. These are both correct ways to go about being a hero, but each comes with its own mindset.
A rescue hero or a battle hero would look at the exact same situation and see it differently. However, I would say there is a third way to look at it.
You can't have one without the other. You want to save the person, win. If you want to win, you have to save the person. It's not about choosing which, it's about going in and knowing you're going to do both.
Izuku's jaw hung open at that, before he started to laugh. All Might, I don't know why I expected anything else.
You really are the greatest hero, aren't you?
All Might smirked. If you want to be number one, you have to look at things just a little differently.
It's not easy, of course, but it's the way things are at the top. Thank you, All Might.
I have some things I need to think over before my match.
Good luck, young Midoriya. With a click, Izuku hung up the phone.
With a light flick, he floated it back over to Recovery Girl's desk, wincing at the slight throbbing he could feel in his head.
Recovery Girl was right, I'm definitely on thin ice with my quirk right now. Still, I need to get ready. I don't have a lot of time left. Closing his eyes, Izuku lay down and started to think.
All Might's words still fresh in his mind.
Are you sure you don't want one of us to walk with you?
All Might asked as Inko waved him off.
I'm fine, Toshinori.
I think I just need a little fresh air, is all. A nice walk will help me calm down.
Oh, and Eri's little head peeked over the back of the seat as she looked at Inko. You make sure you behave while I'm gone. Eri glanced at All Might and the Urarakas nervously. You'll be back, right? Inko smiled brightly.
Oh, I'll only be out for a few minutes.
It'll be fine.
All Might patted Eri's head. I'll make sure she has some more sweets to pass the time.
Eri looked up. I get to have more.
Just don't go spoiling her appetite for later, Inko warned warmly before she turned and left for the hall. When the door closed, All Might turned back around and started looking around through some of his bags. Now, I think I had a candied apple here somewhere. Eri's eyes went wide, and she started to drool a little. Candied apple. Inko, now in the hallway, let out a long sigh. She had expected she would end up getting a little stressed watching her little boy compete in his first sports festival. She had watched the previous year's events with him, so she was aware UA did things a little differently than most schools. Most schools' sporting events didn't have explosions or giant robots. After the first two events, she thought she had been handling everything just fine. She had only cried a little after Izuku had won, but then came the tournament. Watching her son fight had been a different experience altogether. The first match had her on edge, but it had been relatively harmless. It was when Ochako and Himiko had fought that a deep worry had spread throughout her being. She had spent the last year having Ochako in her home, inviting her to eat with them. She knew how important she was to her son, and how much Izuku meant to her. Watching her get so hurt, and for the match to go on for so long, left her so conflicted. The students had to put on a show for the hero. She knew this, but shouldn't the school be making sure things didn't escalate to such extremes? At the very least, the two girls were able to end the match on good terms, maybe even better terms than they had been before. When they had last been over, she had seen the quick side glances the two would have. There had definitely been something bad brewing between the two. After that match, Inko had hoped that they had been an outlier. The rest of the matches helped ease her worry. Even Izuku's next match had been relatively tame in comparison. But then the semi-finals happened. Ochako's match had been heartbreaking to watch. She was so grateful that Toshinori had been able to get them a chance to see Ochako while she was getting treated. Then it was Izuku's turn. The match had only just started, and Inko thought she was going to die. A part of her almost wished that had been the end of it, but Izuku kept coming back and kept throwing himself at Katsuki, again and again. Every time he did, he kept getting hurt, and every time he got hurt, her heart broke. When Izuku had started to train to get into UA, Inko had been so proud, but at the same time, she knew her son was starting a journey that was fraught with danger. She told herself he was getting trained and going to go to the best school to make sure he would be safe following his dream. Then the attack on USJ left her son in critical condition. She never saw just how bad Izuku had been hurt, but the medical report did a good enough job letting her know how bad it had been. In an instant, her worst fear had become a reality, and it hadn't even been a full week into the school year. But things kept going forward, and Izuku didn't seem to let the attack slow him down, so Inko just had to hope things would get better, that things would get easier and she wouldn't have to worry about her son getting hurt. But then today happened. She watched her son get carted out of the arena, burned and bloody, during a school event. He had been hurt during a school event. An event where the teachers were supposed to be looking after the students. She had thought that present Mick's little boast about not worrying about morals had only been something to get the crowd more fired up. Now, though, she wasn't so sure. UA was supposed to be the best, but now, after everything, she couldn't help but feel that her faith in the school had been shaken. Sighing again, Inko shook her head. It was also very possible that she was just too overprotective of Izuku and was blowing everything out of proportion. She had spent her whole life worrying about him and feeling like she was just so helpless to protect him. She supposed that was why she was so grateful to Ochako. To hear her say she would help look after him, to help protect him, had meant so much to her. Inko knew she hadn't been able to protect her son the way he deserved. From his school, from Katsuki. Even from his own father. The ding of an elevator startled Inko from her thoughts. Looking around, Inko was surprised at how far she had ended up walking. Oh dear, I should probably go head back. I don't want to be gone too long, and have everyone worry about me or leave Eri alone with new people for too long. Plus, there's no reason to let myself get carried away with my own worries either. Yes, better to get back before Toshinori spoils Eri with even more. Inko stopped thinking when the elevator doors opened and a flaming giant walked out into the hall in front of her. Gasping, Inko took a few startled steps back. An endeavor? Endeavor's harsh blue eyes glanced around, before he looked down at Inko. It's a pleasure to meet you. Inko wished she could stop herself from stuttering, but the man in front of her was more than a little scary. With barely any recognition he had heard her, Endeavor looked around the hall. There should be a door to a viewing balcony, correct? Inko's mind raced before she nodded vigorously, desperate to answer the giant's question and get away from him. Why yes. Down the hall and around the corner. There's an open archway that leads to a viewing balcony. With a grunt, Endeavor started off, and Inko wished he would hurry. She didn't want to be near this scary giant anymore, or to have those eyes on her. She swore she had seen those eyes before. Yes, she wanted him gone, so Inko knew she should absolutely not say anything else that might get his attention. Not a thing. I suppose we'll both be cheering our sons on in the next match. Especially something like that. Endeavor stopped, and this time, when he looked back at Inko over his shoulder, it was with his full attention. Our sons? Why yes. Please let me introduce myself. My name is Midoriya Inko. Ah. Endeavor fully turned to around. You're that green boy's mother. Izuku was my son, yes. Inko felt a twinge of annoyance at someone calling her son that green boy. After how hard he fought today, people should at least remember his name. Endeavor nodded. Your son has put on a good show. He has an impressive quirk. That is very kind of you to say. Yes, very impressive. To get second place in his first sports festival will go a long way. Inko blinked, her words getting stuck in her throat. She had been ready to again thank Endeavor for his kind words, but she had stopped herself. Second? Endeavor smirked, crossing his arms. It's not meant to be an insult. My Shuto is just a different breed than the rest of his class. He is special, a product of my blood and blessed with my power. He's special. Power. Special. Those words clawed at Inko's heart and mind, bringing back horrible memories she tried not to think about. There's nothing special for those counselors to screw up. Hisashi's words from that day rang hard in Inko's head. She remembered those words so clearly, even if she wished she didn't. She remembered the look in his eyes when he first heard about Izuku's quirk. He was so happy that their son was going to be powerful and special. Now Inko knew why Endeavor's eyes had unnerved her so much. His eyes were the same as Hisashi's. As I said, your boy has put on a good show. Shuto defeating him after his strong showing will make for an excellent start in growing our legacy. Endeavor, believing he had said everything that needed to be said, was ready to turn and leave. You're wrong. Inko didn't stutter as she spoke. The fear and intimidation she felt from Endeavor was gone. He and Hisashi were the same. Their eyes told the story. They viewed their children as only tools to further their own ends. Knowing this man in front of her was the same as her husband changed everything. He wasn't a fiery giant or the number 2 hero. He was like Hisashi, he was pathetic. And she would not let someone that pathetic talk to her about her son like that. You're wrong. Over and over people have looked down on my son. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't care how kind and caring he was because they didn't think he was strong. But my son proved them wrong. He got into UA, and now he's going to show everyone just how wrong they were. How wrong you are. My son isn't a stepping stone for anyone. He's going to become the greatest hero this world has ever seen. Turning on her heel, Inko marched away, not caring if Endeavor had anything else to add.
She didn't want to hear it.
Finding her sweet, she, less than gently, opened the door and let it slam behind her as she sat back down, ignoring the concerned and curious look she was getting.
Eri looked up at Inko, her half-eaten candy apple held tight in her hands. "Are you okay, Mrs. Midoriya?" Inko blinked and then smiled down at Eri. "Oh yes.
I suppose I'm just a little excited to see Izuku win.
I'm all fired up." Eri smiled and clapped. "Yay! Go, Izuku!" All Might watched Inko closely.
He hadn't felt this kind of aggression from her since their first meeting.
"I suppose you had a good walk then?" Inko nodded. "Ah, that's good to hear." There was a pause before Inko finally spoke. "Did you know that Endeavor is a massive jerk? How someone like him could become the number 2 hero is just so sad."
All Might nearly fell out of his seat, while both Mr. and Mistress Uraraka looked at Inko in alarm.
Midoriya Izuku, Todoroki Shuto. Please make your way to the arena.
Your match is scheduled to begin soon." With a grunt, Izuku swung his feet over the side of the bed and sat up, stretching his arms and rolling his shoulders. He was stiff, but it wasn't anything he felt he couldn't work out on the walk to his match.
"Before you go running off, look here." Recovery Girl held up a pen. "Follow it." Izuku did, without much difficulty. "Okay, you seem cognizant. Fine, you're free to go." Smiling happily, Izuku leapt off the bed and immediately felt a little lightheaded and drowsy. Recovery Girl watched him and shook her head. "Do I need to repeat myself?"
"I had to use your body's own stamina, so you're going to feel drowsy, especially after getting treated twice in such a short amount of time. And remember, there's a good chance that once you push your quirk, you'll hit your limit much faster now. You need a proper rest, so don't think you'll be able to pull off another long, drawn-out fight like you just did." Izuku nodded as he rolled his shoulders. "I understand.
Please don't worry. I'm sure that won't be an issue." Oh, I'm sure, too." That, Izuku thought, didn't sound good.
I happened to have a nice chat with the judges while you were off in your own head."
"Oh no. And I told them about your condition." "Oh no.
Especially what it means if your nose bleeds right now."
Izuku gulped. What does that mean?"
"It means, young man, that if your nose starts bleeding during your match, I've told the judges to end it." Izuku fought, with every fiber of his being, not to show any surprise or any kind of emotion besides the understanding smile he desperately tried to keep up. "I understand."
"Excuse me, but is there a restroom I can use before I leave?"
Recovery Girl motioned towards the back wall with her cane.
Izuku quickly thanked her and hurried inside. After locking the door, Izuku turned and leaned on the sink and stared at his reflection in the mirror.
Taking a deep breath, Izuku screamed into the vast void that was his mind.
"Ah! Are you kidding me? I'm in so much trouble.
I can't just, there's no way that."
Aha! After getting that out of his system, Izuku took another deep breath, then a second before he forced himself to calm down. Okay, this isn't as bad as it seems. Okay, who am I kidding? This is just as bad as it seems. There's no way I'm going to be able to deal with all of Todoroki's ice and not get a nosebleed right now. Just think, Izuku. That's what you're supposed to be good at. What did Recovery Girl say, that they'd end the match if they saw my nose bleeding, if they see it? Izuku's head snapped up. I just have to make sure they don't see it.
Immediately, Izuku began looking around the small bathroom stall for anything he could use. The first thing that he grabbed was the toilet paper, but ultimately shook his head. There was no way it would last long enough. He needed something sturdy and absorbent. Like a towel or handcloth, but there wasn't anything like that. Wait, my shirt. That should work. Pulling his sweatshirt up, Izuku grabbed the hem of the back undershirt and carefully began to tear at it, trying not to make as much noise as possible. With every tug, Izuku swore the tearing fabric was the loudest sound in the world in the quiet stall. Soon though, he had 2 small rolls of shirt ready. Taking a breath, Izuku shoved each up his nose and pushed them back as far as he could so they couldn't be seen. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. At all. Suddenly not being able to breathe through his nose was beyond annoying, but to be fair, when his nose really started bleeding he couldn't exactly breathe through his nose then either. Tucking his torn shirt in and pulling his sweatshirt back down, Izuku looked at himself in the mirror for any obvious signs. Satisfied that he couldn't see anything, Izuku flushed the toilet and washed his hands. He had to make it seem like he came in here for a reason other than sticking stuff up his own nose after all. Exiting the stall, Izuku threw some damp paper towels away and smiled brightly as he headed for the door to leave. Well, I think I should be going. Hold it. Izuku tried not to wince too hard. Turning around, Izuku hoped that he wasn't about to get caught right away. However, before Izuku even had a chance to start thinking of any kind of excuse for that scenario, Recovery Girl reached out and put a small bag of gummies into his hand. Here. Eat those on your way to the match. They should give you a little bit of extra energy. I have a feeling you'll need every drop. Oh. Thank you, Recovery Girl. Just try not to end up in here again. I will definitely try. Shaking her head, Recovery Girl walked back to her desk. Your confidence makes me feel completely at ease. The sarcasm dripping from her voice was almost funny, if Izuku could tell she really didn't want him coming back. It was of course possible that he wouldn't have to, but even Izuku doubted that would be the case. Leaving, Izuku stuffed a small handful of gummies into his mouth and prepared himself for the match. And everything he knew he had to do to win. The crowd boomed as around the arena pyrotechnics went off and music blared. Like a conductor leading an orchestra, Present Mike had the people in the stands drumming up as much excitement as possible. This is it, folks. After 2 epic rounds and a series of incredible matches, we have our 2 finalists. Both these young men have fought hard to reach this stage, and both deserve your applause and appreciation. Present Mike paused to allow the crowd ample time to cheer wildly. However, there can be only one victor. The first place podium doesn't have room for 2 people. More fireworks boomed overhead as both Izuku and Shuto made their way to the ring. He might have had his back against the wall against the mistress of gravity Uraraka, but he was able to keep cool under pressure. A young man who's probably related to the glacier that took out the Titanic, from Class 1A, it's Todoroki Shuto. Versus there's Tough and then there's this young man. Shrugging off the explosive attacks of the living epicenter Katsuki, his bright green glow shines like a lantern in the blackest night, from Class 1A, Midoriya Izuku. As both Izuku and Shuto walked into the ring, neither took their eyes off each other. Both were focused as they waited for the moment Present Mike started the match. Izuku could still feel a little dull from the healing, but he fought it back. He was here for a reason, and he wasn't going to stop not when he was so close. FIGH. Hold it! Midnight screamed over Present Mike, cutting him off, and making both Izuku and Shuto flinch as they both had to stop the opening attacks they had been getting ready to use. Midnight leapt down from her podium and walked into the center of the ring. Midnight? Quiet. Up in his booth, Present Mike flinched while Aizawa raised an eyebrow and impressive feat since he was still wrapped up in bandages. What did you do to piss her off now? Midnight, satisfied she wouldn't be interrupted, turned and addressed the crowd, as well as Izuku and Shuto. Her voice boomed over the loudspeakers. I would like to remind everyone that, despite what Present Mike said about bringing on the injuries and not worrying about silly morals, this is not a fight to the death. Back up in the booth, Aizawa nodded. Oh, that's what you did. I can't be held responsible for that. That's not my fault. You want to tell her that? Also, you're still live. Oh my god. Present Mike ripped his hand away from the microphone and gulped nervously as he realized Midnight was glaring up at him. Hard. After she was sure Present Mike got her message, she turned back to Izuku and Shuto.
I want both of you to say you understand this as well. You're students competing in a school-sanctioned event. Just because you have some experience with more extreme combat doesn't mean you should be using that experience here. Izuku frowned, feeling a little singled out.
It wasn't like he made it a habit of doing reckless things. It's just that recklessness had been needed to solve his issues.
And only his violent issues.
Like Katsuki and Shigaraki, and the villains by the USJ lake, and the villains in the hallway at the USJ, and the zero-pointer at the entrance exam and the sludge villain.
Those were rare cases. It wasn't a pattern. It wasn't.
I understand, Izuku replied simply, his voice getting picked up by Midnight's mic and echoing over the crowd.
Yes, Sensei, Shoto said, mirroring the same exuberance Izuku had given in his answer, clearly not thinking this was necessary at all. Midnight frowned at the two, accepting their response, though not exactly happy with their tones. She then pointed her whip at Izuku. One last thing, Midoriya.
I have spoken to Recovery Girl, and she has informed me of her appraisal of your condition.
Izuku's eyebrows rose in surprise.
He was aware that the judges knew, Recovery Girl had told him as much, but for Midnight to bring up the subject now, and in front of the whole stadium, was shocking. She must be trying to use the crowd to pressure him into following her and Recovery Girl's decision, and it ticked him off a little. So that you are aware, Cementos and I will be watching you closely, and if at any time we see your nose start to bleed from you overexerting your quirk, the match will be called immediately.
There will be no discussions. Am I clear? Everyone in the stadium could tell Izuku was annoyed.
Everyone watching at home could tell, too, but the stern-gaze Midnight had Izuku and made it clear she was only going to accept one answer from him.
As respectfully as he could, Izuku nodded. Yes, ma'am.
I'll just have to make sure my nose doesn't bleed then.
Midnight started to nod, satisfied that at least that was settled. Even if Izuku wasn't exactly happy with the added pressure, she couldn't exactly blame him for that.
He was here to win, and that mindset made young heroes act up. She herself wasn't guilt-free of going a little overboard here or there. She stopped, though, and gave him a questioning look as she thought about Izuku's words. The way he had worded his response felt strange. It had been vague, but also specific. Weird. However, since she couldn't find anything exactly wrong with his response, she turned and started to walk back to her podium so that the match could finally start.
I'm sorry, Midnight Sensei, but is that it? Midnight almost tripped.
Years of being in the public eye helped her keep her composure as she turned to look back at Izuku, who was radiating defiance and contempt.
Or just your typical teenage attitude. Come again, Midoriya? You're making such a big deal about my nose bleeds, aren't you going to do the same for Todoroki? Izuku made sure to point when he mentioned Shoto's name.
The other boy gave him a questioning glare as he did, while Midnight gazed over at him. I mean, if my nose bleeds are such a big deal, the fact that his ice can make him suffer from clear signs of hypothermia that he couldn't fix during his last match dash. Shoto narrowed his eyes at Izuku. Shouldn't that warrant the same warning?
Or am I the only one that has to worry about that kind of thing because the son of the Endeavor gets special treatment?
More than a few jaws were hanging open as everyone from 1A listened to Izuku.
Did Midoriya just put Midnight on blast? Where is this coming from? I mean, Midnight did kinda open this up. This feels like a power play. I mean, Midoriya's not wrong about Todoroki.
He warmed himself up, though.
He can melt ice, too.
He didn't during any of his matches, though.
So Midoriya has a sassy side, Karo.
Midoriya may have a point, Tenya said, arms chopping, but to talk in such a flippant way to a teacher is uncalled for.
Himiko was almost salivating. Watching Izuku take Midnight to task was like watching one of her fantasies come to life.
One of the tamers ones that didn't have the handcuffs, the hanging couch, or the knives covered in chocolate.
Ochako rolled her eyes and ignored her. This is a little out of character for him. May scratched her hair. Maybe he really wants to make sure he gets a chance to avenge your loss or something and doesn't like that Midnight is kinda getting in the way? Boys like doing that kind of thing for girls, right? Deku was a little agitated when he came to see me. Deku's always been a pain in the ass.
Not sure why you guys are so surprised, Katsuki said in an annoyed huff.
Ochako turned and glared at him.
After biting back some more colorful language, she answered, only someone as morally bankrupt as you would see kindness like that Bakugou.
While Ochako and Katsuki glared daggers at each other, Hitoshi crossed his arms as he replayed Izuku's response to Midnight in his head. Was Midoriya's answer weird to anyone else? Momo nodded.
Now that you mention it, the words he chose were a little off.
Tsuyu tapped her chin. He didn't say anything about not overexerting his quirk.
He just said he wouldn't let his nose bleed. Hanta scratched his head as he thought about that. Maybe he's going to try and use his quirk to keep the bleeding internal or something.
Can he do that? Just push the blood back in?
Denki shrugged. I mean, that's where the blood is supposed to be, so it fixes the problem, right? Kyuka covered her face with her hands. Oh my god. Ijiru frowned, deciding to ignore that last comment entirely.
Would Midoriya actually try something like that? It sounds stupid and maybe a little dangerous.
It's one thing to ignore your own safety like that, but it's another to actually go out of your way to hide it from others, especially the teachers. The class was quiet as they thought about that. Then Katsuki grumbled under his breath.
That fucking idiot.
While at the same time, the railing in front of the seats rang softly as Ochako banged her head against it.
There was a moment's pause before a long woohoo echoed from the crowd. Midnight would have rolled her eyes if she wasn't the one getting called out.
On one hand, Izuku was showing spirit, which was impressive and something she liked to see in young upcoming heroes. On the other, she wasn't a fan that how everything was turning out. She had hoped that making her and Recovery Girl's decision to call the match if things took a turn for Izuku would pressure the boy to not go off the deep end and to try and win. Those plans were now coming back and biting her. She also couldn't exactly argue his point either. In Shudo's last match against Ochako, he had been very clearly in bad shape, and only warmed himself up after the match. If he was pushed like that again and refused to take measures to keep himself safe. Todoroki, Midnight began, turning to look at Shudo, whose head snapped to look at her. If I see any signs of hypothermia like I saw in your last match, I will end the fight for your protection, too.
Izuku could see Shudo glaring at him before he turned and nodded at Midnight, showing his understanding. Satisfied, Midnight returned to her podium, leaving the two alone in the ring. Izuku could see that Shudo wasn't happy with him.
However, at this point, he really didn't care. He was here for a reason, and Shudo's being a little angry at him wasn't much of a concern. Izuku rolled his eyes and shrugged at Shudo. I don't see why you're so upset.
It's not like you have anything to actually worry about.
After all, you should be able to warm yourself up.
Right?
No, Shudo being a little angry wasn't much of a concern, because by the time this was done, Shudo was probably going to be very angry at him, which was exactly what Izuku wanted.
Midoriya, Shudo, who normally didn't show any emotions, growled out Izuku's name.
For someone like him, it might as well have been like screaming. Izuku could actually feel the air around them getting colder, his own breath just barely visible as a ghostly mist. With Midnight back on her podium, Present Mix's voice bombed over the loudspeakers. Well, now that that's over, now that all the contestants have been reminded of the rules and safety standards that our school holds in such high regards, it's time to get this final match underway. The crowd cheered, happy for the show to finally start.
Midoriya!
Izuku breathed deep as he started pulling on his power, ignoring that even doing that made his head hurt.
Todoroki! Small specks of frost started covering his right arm and hand, dropping to the ground as he clenched his fist. Around his foot, tiny ice crystals were starting to spread out along the ground. Fight! Shudo leaned forward, grinding his right foot into the ground as he launched a pillar of ice right for Izuku.
While nowhere near as big as his uncontrolled attack against Ochako, it was still big enough to make sure Izuku wouldn't be able to jump out of the way if he even reacted in time.
Shudo had decided to go with the same approach he had taken with Momo and end the match as quickly as he could.
Giving Izuku any time to think would be a disaster, and he had proven to be more than capable of fighting in a prolonged fight during his match with Katsuki.
Shudo knew he had to end the match now.
In no time, the ice covered the distance between the two, and Shudo was sure it was about to drive Izuku right out of the ring. Until suddenly, after a flash of green light, the ice twisted and Rico headed off to the side and out of the ring, spreading over the grass until Shudo took his foot off the ground in shock. Across from him, Izuku had his hand raised and tilted to the side, in the same direction as the ice. Izuku's expression was calm, for the most part, but his eyes bore right into Shudo. Izuku's hand gripped into a fist as the ice between them began to glow, before loud cracks and snaps filled the air as the ice shattered. Izuku yanked several large chunks of ice up from the ground and held them up. Delaware smash. Shudo's eyes went wide as he leapt to the side, just dodging the ice chunks that slammed into the ground where he had been and exploded into tiny ice shards. Scrambling, Shudo slammed his right hand and foot to the ground, this time sending a wave of ice towards Izuku. Izuku frowned at the attack, and without moving from his starting spot, pointed both his hands at the oncoming wave. He twisted his palms up and lifted, the ice shot up into the air, forming a large arch several meters high before it came down harmlessly behind Izuku. Grunting under his breath, Shudo got up slowly, eyeing the newly formed wall of ice that separated himself and Izuku, hiding him from view. I wasn't planning on him being able to redirect my ice like this. I figured he'd do what he did during the Capture the Flag event and just try and break it. Regardless, moving this much ice has to be putting a strain on him after all his other matches. I just have to keep pressing. Shudo's eyes moved from the left of the wall to the right as he got himself ready to attack. He'll have to come around either side if he wants to attack me. Left or right? Left or re-dash. Suddenly, in the very center of the ice wall, a large green circle of light formed. From the light's center, cracks spread out over the ice's surface as the green light glowed brighter and brighter. Shudo barely had enough time to form an ice wall in front of himself before a large hole was blown out of the center and ice shards embedded into his defense. When the last of the shards stopped flying, Shudo stood up and went looking for where Izuku was, expecting him to have started his attack. He hadn't. Izuku was still standing exactly where he had started, looking right at Shudo without a trace of a bloody nose. Izuku watched Shudo carefully from his spot, eyeing the other boy as he waited for his next attack. When none came, Izuku titled his head and asked in a calm, almost dismissive voice, "So are you going to keep trying the same trick again, or are you ready to take this seriously, Todoroki?" "Yep, my nose is already bleeding. Thank goodness the strips I tore from my shirt are blocking it up, but now it's in my mouth." "Yuck." "Well, maybe I shouldn't say yuck. Toga likes the taste, now this is like with people that like bell peppers. It's yucky." With the ice arching over him, Izuku was blocked from the view of Shudo and most of the crowd. He took the opportunity to collect himself. Recovery Girl had been right on the money, his buffer was gone even after her healing. He'd need an actual good night's rest after today to fully recover. Redirecting the ice instead of flat out stopping it had taken a bit of the edge off, but Izuku could tell he could only do it a few more times. After that. No, don't worry about that right now. You're here to do something. Stick to the plan, and get it done. Taking a deep breath, Izuku focused on the ice right in front of him. Shudo hadn't come around the side to continue his attack, so he must be waiting for him to make the first move. Shudo probably thinks he can get the drop on me as soon as I turn up at one of those corners. Izuku, however, wasn't going to walk into that kind of trap. With his focus on the patch of ice in front of him, Izuku let his quirk build up and fired. The ice shattered outward like it had been shot, and Izuku once again made sure he looked as calm and composed as he possibly could. As the mist and frost cleared, Izuku watched as Shudo came out from behind his wall. "Okay, time to start Operation Poke the Air. So are you going to keep trying the same trick again, or are you ready to take this seriously, Todoroki?" Shudo's eyes narrowed. "What?" I asked, "Are you ready to take this seriously? Or are you going to just keep holding yourself back and disrespect me like you did Uraraka? You don't know what you're talking about, and if Uraraka wants to be a sore loser dash." The ice barrier separating the two flashed green before it shattered, sending ice chunks into Shudo as he stepped back in shock. However, when he took a step back with his right foot, he suddenly couldn't bring it back down. Alarmed, Shudo looked down at his shoe, which was glowing. With his foot held up in the air, he couldn't use it to make ice. And as off balance as he was, he wouldn't be able to press his right hand into anything either. Just as it hit him how bad of a situation he was in, Izuku closed the gap and swung a right haymaker into his jaw and knocked him into the ground.
Don't you dare call Uraraka that!
Shudo, ripping his foot free of Izuku's hold, rolled away, his hand brushing the ground as he did, putting up large spikes of ice to prevent Izuku from chasing after him. Izuku frowned, his calm demeanor now long gone. With a wave of his hand, the ice cracked and he ripped it off the ground, keeping it in one piece. Shudo, realizing he had just given Izuku huge ice spikes to throw, quickly put up a much thicker wall between the two, which Izuku drove the spikes through, shattering everything. She didn't have to hear your sob story to figure out what you were doing. She figured out you didn't use your fire on purpose. Shudo's face twisted, and Izuku saw a flash of real rage for the first time on the other boy's face. At the same time, he sent another wave of ice out to crush him. Izuku focused on the center of it and split it. Sending ice cascading on either side on him, how many more times are you going to try that? You're not going to beat me only using half your power. I told you, I will never use his power. I made a vow to never use it. My mother's ice is enough to beat you. Izuku made a show of whipping his hand under his nose and checking it while Shudo fell back, giving himself more space. I'm not bleeding yet, Todoroki. How about you? Feeling cold yet? Shut up. You and I both know you could fix that right now. I said shut up. Shudo started another attack, but the ice glowed green just as it was formed, shattering as he made it. Shudo, however, powered through and soon was sending a pillar of ice right for Izuku. Izuku reached out and pulled as many of the large chunks of ice that were strewn about the arena, slamming them into the pillar's sides and shattering it before it could reach him. Izuku felt his stomach turn. He felt sick. Probably from the fact his bloody nose was draining down the back of his throat. He felt dizzy and tired. Whatever sugar high he had gotten from all those gummies Recovery Girl gave him had long since worn off. Need to speed this up. You're shivering, Todoroki. If you're not careful, Midnight will call this match. You'll bleed before that happens. I'll outlast you. You won't get in the way of my goal. Well, looks like I've gotten under his skin at least, 'cause that's more a toga line than anything else. Izuku shook his head. Your goal? And what is your goal, Todoroki? I told you that already. You mean humiliating your father, right? Is that really why you're here? So you can shatter your father's dream. You know, I bet if I asked anyone else that from our class, they would all say the same thing. Do you know what that is? Shudo readied for another attack, frost dropping from his fingers as he got ready to try and encase Izuku in ice. I don't car dash. To become a hero. Shudo's attack stopped. We're all here to do everything we can to become heroes. Today is one of our best chances to further our goal. So that's why everyone is giving it everything they have. They are fighting for their dream. Everyone but you. You say you're just here to hurt your father? Does that mean you don't care about being a hero? Because the way you're fighting, you sure don't look like you want to become one. And for you to stand here now shows you have nothing but disrespect for everything our classmates are trying to achieve. You don't understand anything. My vow matters. What my father did to my family matters. Maybe you don't understand what it's like to have a father who destroyed your family, but that matters. You don't just get to brush that off because you don't understand what I went through. Izuku looked at Shudo hard before taking a deep breath, and finally saying what he knew he had to say. Todoroki. You're. They're talking, and we can't hear anything. Mina groaned into her hands. Ochako sympathized, but Ochako had other things on her mind. While the match had started off quick with Shudo spamming out long-range ice attacks, reaffirming Ochako's theory that Shudo sucked at close-range combat, it was now slowing down, with Shudo backing up and Izuku slowly advancing on him while they were obviously talking to each other. While the amount of talking was strange, it wasn't anywhere near as strange as the fight itself. She knew Izuku had to realize that Shuto struggled at close range, but besides the single time he closed the gap to punch Shuto in the face, something she might have cheered just a bit too loud for. Izuku was acting too reserved. Could he be too tired from Recovery Girl's treatments? No, he seemed fine, and she doubted Recovery Girl would release him to have the match if that was the case. No, Izuku was doing this on purpose. What are you up to, Deku? Her mood wasn't helped much since she wasn't the only one noticing Izuku's strange behavior. Katsuki also clearly could tell something was up, going off his grunts and annoyed groans. She really just wished he would shut up. Jairu. What are they saying? Tell us. Denki begged. Kyuka groaned, Kaminari, I already told you. The crowd is too loud for me to make them out. I'd need to plug into something like a directional mic. A what? Momo stepped in. It's a specialized microphone that takes in sound from a specific area. Denki scratched his head. Yeah, I still don't get it. Maybe if you showed me what one looked like. Shrugging, Momo rolled up her sleeve, and after a few seconds of concentration, a black cylindrical directional mic popped out from her arm. Handing the mic over, Momo continued her explanation. Unlike a regular mic that takes in sound from all directions, this one focuses on what is in front of it. So you just point and listen. Denki nodded and smiled. That's great. Before turning around, here you go, Jairu. Now tell us what those two are saying. Kyuka blinked in shock while Momo sputtered. The rest of the class turned and looked at the three. Hanta pointed at Denki, then to Momo. Did that actually work? Himiko started cackling. Yep, Denki just outsmarted Momo. Kyuka, I think you have to use that now on principle. You're stuck. Tenya frowned. Listening in on them seems like a huge invasion of privacy. Himiko shook her head. Nah, Denki just won. You can't steal this from him now. Momo hid her face in her hands, ashamed, while the rest of the class nodded in agreement with Himiko. Groaning, but making sure no one could guess that she also was interested in what was being said between Izuku and Shuto, Kyuka plugged one ear jack into the mic and another into her phone to use as a speaker. While Kyuka hurried to get it set up, Himiko leaned forward in her seat. At least now we can find out what those two have been yakking about. Tenya rubbed his chin. Perhaps it has something to do with the way Todoroki challenged him before the sports festival started? He did drag Midoriya away when we were talking after our win, too, Momo added. Ochako blinked. Wait, he did? Just after Toga left to get changed. After Toga left, oh, that's why I didn't notice that. Guiltily, Ochako glanced over towards Himiko now that she was briefly reminded of exactly why she wasn't aware of Izuku and Shuto's second talk. Himiko rolled her eyes and waved her off, clearly signaling to Ochako not to worry about it. Katsuki let out a short huff while everyone talked. Mei looked over at him. Hey, Baka, whatever, Katsuki growled, but Mei wasn't fazed at all. You know anything about it? Why the fuck would I know anything? Katsuki asked, looking annoyed, but not quite looking Mei in the eye. Well, you followed after them, right? That got a few eyes on Katsuki, especially Ochako. Her eyes were drilling right into Katsuki, but he didn't seem to care. I don't give a flying fuck what those two talked about, nor should any of you. Neither should fucking Deku for that matter. If he's going to win, he should fucking get on with it. Fucking stupid shit. That, Ochako thought, wasn't a denial. At all. Okay, got it, Kyuka called out, grabbing everyone's attention. Ochako slowly turned away from Katsuki, making a mental note to find out just what was going on. Kyuka pointed the mic towards the arena, and turned everything on. And through. Oh, it's working. Also, wow, is that Todoroki yelling? I feel like we just missed something dash. Todoroki, you're pathetic. The mood of the class shifted hard. Multiple jaws were on the floor. Some were looking back from the arena and then towards Kyuka's phone speakers. Was that? Mina was having trouble even saying anything.
Even Katsuki had a strange look to his face. Ochako was just at a loss for words. Deku? Do you really think any of what you just said matters? You keep going on and on about your vow. About how you'll win today without using your fire. It's not my dash. Shut up. More than a few students jumped in their seats. Hearing Izuku scream like that was shocking. However, Ochako's ears had perked up the moment Izuku had used the word fire. She also didn't like how in her mind she could hear alarm bells going off. Wait, just hold on a second. Deku, what are you doing? You're not actually trying to dash. Katsuki groaned, an ugly sneer spreading across his face. Deku, you stupid shit. Just shut up and listen, Todoroki. I've stood by and let you talk at me twice today, now you are going to listen to me. Let me tell you something, you are so focused on something so small today, you're not even bothering to ask yourself what you will do tomorrow. What are you going to do if your life is on the line? What if, tomorrow, the League of Villains attacks again, and you're fighting someone like that Nomu? Ochako felt her breath hitch. Do you really think that's a fight you could win only using half your strength? I can win with my mother's dash. No, you can't. Not forever. What would you do if a villain could control ice? Are you willing to die because you refuse to use your fire? Do you think the villains will hesitate or play down to your level? They won't. They don't care about that kind of stuff. They won't care about all the horrible stuff your family went through. They won't care about your vows or your scars. All they will do is kill you. Todoroki, do you think when Shigaraki ordered Noma to kill me when it bashed my head open on the ground, shattered my arm, and left me to drown, do you think either of them stopped and thought, gee, I wonder if this kid had a nice family life, or if his father abandoned him and his mom because his father thought he was weak and worthless just like everyone else? Ah. No. Ochako leapt from her chair and ripped the mic out of Kyuka's hand. Desperately, Ochako hurried to unplug Kyuka's ear jack and clutched the mic to her chest as she fell back into her seat. Hey! Give that back! Come on, Midoriya was really tearing into Todoroki. I want to hear more. While more of her classmates started to complain, Himiko spoke over them all. Hold it! Hold it! Ochako winced when Himiko turned to look at her, having a good idea what she was about to ask. Ochako, what was that bit that Izuku said at the end there? Before you cut him off. About his father. Todoroki, do you think when Shigaraki ordered Noma to kill me, when it bashed my head open on the ground and shattered my arm and left me to drown, do you think either of them stopped and thought, gee, I wonder if this kid had a nice family life, or if his father abandoned him and his mom because his father thought he was weak and worthless just like everyone else did? The anger Shudo had a moment ago cracked as he blinked at that. That won't. Izuku powered on, his raw emotions driving him to not give Shudo a chance to say anything. But fine, maybe you don't care what the villains think. I don't dash. What about the people you're supposed to save? What about the people we as heroes are supposed to save and protect? Is your vow more important than their lives? Heroes are supposed to give everything to save people. Not just half. Would you let someone die just to keep it? What will you tell that person's family when they beg you for a reason why their loved one had to die? Will you tell them the same story you told me? Do you think they'll care? Shudo was quiet and had no answer for him. Now, he had stopped retreating and trying to use his ice. Izuku sneered when he saw that and walked right up to him and grabbed Shudo by his collar. You never thought about it, did you? Damn it, Todoroki, why are you here? Answer me. I'm here, to reject my father's power. Crack. Pulling his arm back, Izuku slugged Shudo across the face, knocking Shudo to the ground. You keep saying that. Your mom's power. Your father's power. Todoroki, it's the same thing. It's your power. The power you have is the power to become a hero, right? Isn't that what you want? Don't you want to become a hero?
Those words rang in Shuto's mind, bringing up memories from a long time ago. Memories of words his own mother had said to him. Words that his anger had made him forget about.
You want to be a hero, don't you? It's okay for you to be one. Shuto, you don't have to be a prisoner of your blood. You are you. My darling son. Shuto, it's okay for you to become who you want to be. I want.
The ice around Shuto started to crack and hiss, turning into steam. Suddenly a wave of heat slammed into Izuku, forcing him back in Alarm a Hero. Shuto was engulfed in fire that shot up into the air, up above to the highest level of the stands and reached out to the edges of the arena. Izuku gasped and put up his arms to protect his face from the heat and protect his eyes from how bright the fire was. Around him, Izuku could hear the ice walls crack and hiss as they melted. Quickly, the large explosion of fire receded until it was compressed into Shuto's left side. Even with the fire wrapped around him, the heat was still overwhelming. Everyone in the stands could still feel it. Convinced he wasn't about to get too burned off the bat, Izuku lowered his arms and watched as Shuto stood up. Any frost that had been on his body was now long gone. Midoriya, even though I'm sure you want to win, you went this far. Damn it, even though I'm your enemy here, you went so far as to help me remember who I am. You're even smiling now. Izuku reached up and, sure enough, he had a huge grin on his face.
Which one of us is screwing around and not giving it their all now? You might have been about to block and redirect my ice, but I saw your burns after your fight with Bakugou. You weren't able to block the heat and fire. So what are you going to do now? In this situation, Shuto lifted up his left arm with orange fire dancing across his skin. Your insanity has given me the win, so don't blame me for what happens next. Izuku laughed. A feeling of mirth and joy bubbled out from his very soul, and he couldn't do anything but laugh. Maybe you're right, Todoroki. Maybe I could have beaten you if you stayed like you were, but then, I wouldn't have actually beaten you. I want to win, but I also can't do nothing when I see someone is in trouble. Shuto shook his head. So you sacrificed your victory to save me. Izuku's joyful smile hardened, taking on a determined edge. Todoroki, when did I say I wasn't still planning on winning? Shuto's eyes widened in shock, before he thought back to his own assumption of Izuku before their match started. Izuku is a planner. Midoriya, you planned on fighting me like this? Izuku shrugged. I planned on helping you and winning, so? And if I refused to use my fire? Oh, I would have walked out of the ring. Shuto almost fell over from the shock of that. You'd have what? I told you, Todoroki, I came here to help you and win. I wasn't going to settle for just one of those things. Floored by that statement, Shuto could only shake his head. You're crazy, but I'm afraid you are going to have to settle for only one of your goals. I'm going to win this match. Unless you actually have a plan on beating me now. In a flash of green, Izuku's seat top started to shred into long strips and he began to wrap them around his hands and arms. Similarly how he would wrap them if he was going to practice his boxing. I have a plan, all right. After watching you fight Uraraka, I don't think you're great in close quarters, so I'm going to punch you. A lot. And not let you hit me with your fire. Shuto's head tilted to the side. That's it? You're going to punch me and not get hit by my fire? Yep. That's not a plan. It is, too. That's not even half a plan. Hey! Shuto shook his head, looking at Izuku in disbelief, but at the same time, he had to respect him, even if he was crazy and in desperate need of a reality check. As he looked at Izuku, though, he paused when something caught his eye. Izuku had torn up his seat shirt to give his hands and arms extra protection from the fire when he tried to get in close to hit him. He hadn't done anything to his undershirt and yet, the bottom was very clearly frayed. I'll just have to make sure my nose doesn't bleed then. Midoriya, what happened to your shirt? Izuku glanced down quickly before shrugging and getting into his fighter's stance. Ask me after the match. Shuto. Izuku and Shuto blinked in alarm as they both turned to see Endeavor storming down the stars in the stands, his voice carrying throughout the whole stadium. Ochako, what was that bit that Izuku said at the end there? Before you cut him off. About his father.
Ochako shifted uncomfortably in her seat as the eye of the class all shifted towards her. You see, that's kinda a personal thing to ask. That also wasn't a no, Hitoshi said, you know, now that I think about it. I don't think I've ever heard Midoriya mention his dad. There are, Ochako chewed on her words. Izuku had only told her about his father after a very hateful call after the USJ attack. It was obviously a subject he didn't like to talk about, nor was it something she imagined he would like others to know about, which made the fact he had brought it up at all with Shudo something worth noting. Reasons for that. Reasons? Ochako was still trying to think of what was the best thing to say when Katsuki cut her off. His dad is a piece of shit that left him and his mom years ago. Ochako's eyes went wide, and she turned to glare at Katsuki. Bakugou. Oh, shut the fuck up. If Deku's going to be stupid enough to throw it out there, he can deal with the consequences. He wouldn't have if he knew we were all listening, Ochako countered. Around her, more than a few of her classmates looked away guiltily. Tenya looked quizzically at Ochako and Katsuki. How do you two know about this? I imagine Ochako is right and that Midoriya wouldn't have been so open if he knew we could hear him. Yet you two know? Ochako and Katsuki shared a quick glance. Before they turned away from each other, Katsuki crossed his arms and glared down towards the arena. I was fucking there during the whole shitstorm when we were kids. Ochako rubbed her arms nervously. Deku and I talked the day after the villain attack. His father called, and one thing led to another. To check on him? Himiko asked, almost hopefully. No, the frost in Ochako's voice spoke volumes. Even if the class didn't know exactly what the call had been about, the fact it wasn't to check on Izuku's well-being was enough. Himiko, however, leaned forward, and the bit about why the piece of shit left? Ochako nodded and Himiko again swore loudly, which Ochako agreed with every word. While the class sat in silence, a new question started to bubble up into Ochako's mind. Why did Izuku bring it up at all? It sounded like he was trying to convince Todoroki to use his fire. But what would that have to do with his fave? Ochako's thoughts were interrupted as she was hit by a sudden wave of heat, moments before the crowd was blinded as a pillar of fire roared up into the air. Holy crap! Look at all that fire! Hitoshi hissed at the heat. How can that be so hot all the way up here? He did it, Ochako said in awe. He got Todoroki to use his fire. Okay, but why? Himiko asked. That kind of firepower is insane. I get that he has that new shield move thing, but dash. That fucking shield won't do jack shit with all that fire. My explosion still burned Deku. He's fucked now. Katsuki sneered down at the arena. Deku, you fucking shit. I told you not to worry about half and half sob story. Well, you got him like this, so you better fucking win, or else I'll jam that silver medal down your dumbass throat. Was Deku trying to help Todoroki? Ochako wondered out loud. Thinking back to exactly what they had heard, Izuku had been drilling Shudo over some kind of vow to not use his fire, bringing up situations that might even cost Shudo his life. The more she thought about it, the more crazy the idea sounded. Who would do something like that in the middle of a match? Deku would. It was a simple answer, but one that was set in stone in her mind. Izuku was not the kind of person to sit back and do nothing if he came across someone that was in trouble or hurting. If he thought Shudo needed help and this was the best way to do it, even if it put his chances of winning in jeopardy, he would do it. Deku, you're just so incredible. Ochako watched Izuku carefully as he prepared himself. Clearly, he had gone out of his way to help Shudo, but that didn't look like it was deterring him from the fight. In fact, the look on him now, a smile on his face and determination in his eyes, made it crystal clear he was still going for the win. Okay, Deku, now you can show the world just how awesome you are by beating Todoroki when he's giving it his all. Oh my god, he's taking his sweatshirt off again. Damn it, Deku, why are you so Shuto? The harsh yell snapped Ochako out of her thoughts as she and the rest of the class looked for the source of the scream. Tenya pointed down to the bottom of the stands. Look, it's Endeavor. Down below, Endeavor was marching towards the bottom railing, screaming praise. Ochako guessed that's what it was towards his son. Even from her seat way up in the stands, she could tell there was something almost crazed in endeavor. The fire around him burned brightly and uncontrollably. It was a little scary. So you finally accepted yourself. That's it. Good. For you, it all starts here. You have my blood, and with that fire you will surpass me. You'll be the one to finally make my dream a reality. Ochako blinked. What the hell? President Mike's voice soon came in over the loudspeakers, Endeavor shouting some words of encouragement. He's such a doting father, ladies and gentlemen. Was that what that was? Himiko asked, scratching her head, 'cause that sounded more like a lunatic's raving. Suyu tapped her chin. Sports parents are special. Collectively, the rest of 1A nodded before turning their eyes back to the fight, all of them eager to see just what happens next. Well, that was a thing. Shaking his head, Izuku turned his focus back towards Shudo, who he was happy to note, didn't seem fazed at all by his father's sudden interruption. Midoriya, one warning. Shudo began, the fire on his left getting brighter as he spoke. I don't have a lot of practice using my left side. I'm not as precise and in control as I am with my right. Izuku thought back to the huge glaciers Shudo had made when fighting Ochako and glanced quickly at the remaining large ice walls and pillars that were quickly evaporating away. That's what he calls control? I can't promise you're not going to get burned. Izuku shook his head. I'll worry about that if you manage to hit me. Shuto nodded. That was the answer he had expected. With that out of the way, both knew the match was on. Throwing his left hand out, Shudo unleashed a blast of fire right at Izuku. The fire's roar was staggering, almost sounding alive. Izuku reacted immediately and yanked the large chunks of the remaining ice from around the arena and slammed them into a giant wall in front of himself. Izuku winced as he heard the ice hiss and crack. The great heat from Shudo's fire was easily eating away at the wall. Welp, that's not a big surprise. Time for Plan B. The collision of ice and fire sent out a large cloud of steam that obscured Shudo's view. Frowning, Shudo pulled his arm back, stopping the fire, and examined where Izuku was. The ice was now completely gone, and Shudo was looking for Izuku's distinctive glow. He had used dust to try and hide before, so steam clouds could work, too. However, when he couldn't see any glow, Shudo became concerned and started to scan the whole arena. Where is he? Left and right, Shudo looked, but couldn't find any sign on Izuku. Midoriya, where dash? Shudo's thoughts were cut off when he felt something small land on his head and sizzle away. Shudo immediately knew it was water, but why would he be getting dripped on when it was a clear day? Shudo's eyes went wide and he looked up, just in time to see Izuku, hanging onto a chunk of melting ice he was levitating to fly above him. The moment Shudo looked up, Izuku let go, dropping down with both held together in a sledgehammer punch. As he fell, the fire around Shudo vanished just before a wall of ice shot up between Izuku and himself. Izuku slammed into the ice, but as he slid down, Izuku focused on the wall and shoved, shattering it and throwing the pieces right into Shudo. Several slammed into Shudo before he reignited his fire, and the rest melted before hitting him. Izuku, however, hadn't stopped with just that attack. Instead, he used it as a distraction as he rushed for Shudo, closing the distance at an alarming rate. Shudo responded by throwing another blast of fire at Izuku, who quickly scrambles to the side, just dodging the attack, but he never stopped his forward movement. The wrapping around his arm closest to the fire, scorched and turned black, but Izuku didn't pay it any mind. He was now in striking range, and he wasn't going to let this opportunity get away. Smash! Izuku threw the hardest right hook he could, while at the same time Shudo put his left hand between them and fired. Izuku's punch connected, staggering Shudo back, but Shudo was still able to get his fire off. Izuku put his arms up to protect himself as the fire hit and blasted him back. The wrappings around his arms turned black and fell apart as he rolled across the ground. Before he could get up, Shudo unleashed another blast of fire. Izuku reached out, and ignoring the sudden spike of pain in his head, grabbed as much dirt as he could and pulled it towards him. No time for a wall. With no time for a proper wall, Izuku buried himself under the grass and dirt, giving himself some protection from Shudo's attack. When Shudo finally let up, Izuku hissed. The pain in his head wasn't going away even after he stopped using his quirk. If he had to guess, judging by the pain he was in, and the fact that the concrete underneath him felt like it was moving, he was probably down to 1 or 2 big moves before he was done, maybe 3 if he decided he was willing to get really chewed out by Recovery Girl, and his mother, and Ochako. I guess I better make it all count. Shudo watched as Izuku climbed out from the smoking dirt pile. He frowned as he watched Izuku struggle to get back to his feet. He was open, but Shudo held back as he took the time to observe him. He's pale and looks dazed. Dizzy, too, he must be hurting more from his quirk than he let on. I'm sure if he hadn't clogged up his nose, he'd have been bleeding long before this. Shudo snuck a glance towards Midnight, and saw that she too was watching Midoriya closely. He could see the hand holding her whip twitching. She's on the verge of calling the match. Even if Midoriya isn't bleeding, it's obvious he's not doing great now. Another blast of fire, or even an ice attack would end it. Even if Izuku was able to deflect the attack, Shudo doubted he'd be able to do anything else. Midnight would call the match, and that left Shudo with a bad taste in his mouth. Izuku had helped him, and he didn't want him to lose because of a medical call. Shudo also didn't want to win because of a medical call either. No, Shudo decided. The win would come down to this next move. Giving Izuku this chance was the best way he could think to say thank you for everything he had done. Midoriya. Izuku, now on his feet, looked over at Shudo. Prepare yourself, Midoriya. I'm ending this now. Digging his feet into the ground, Izuku watched Shudo carefully. Whatever was coming next was going to be big, he could feel it. Shudo took a step forward with his right foot, and the world turned cold. Even with Shudo's left side burning, Izuku couldn't feel any heat from the fire. Waves and waves of ice rushed out from nowhere Shudo had stepped, creating a wall behind him and freezing the whole arena in a layer of ice. Great arches spiraled up into the air, twisting and falling back to the ground as Shudo froze everything. As the ice threatened to consume Izuku, he reached out and split it right in front of himself, redirecting it to either side. That's one. Izuku's head screamed in pain, but he forced it down. Thankfully, the extreme cold made his skin prickle and hurt, so he focused on that instead. As he pushed the ice aside though, Izuku couldn't help but think something was up. This doesn't feel like an attack. He's freezing everything, not just attacking me. He's just cooling everything down. Plus, there's that wall he put up behind himself. Todoroki, what are you dash? Oh crud. Shudo's left side blazed to life, and Izuku suddenly knew exactly what Shudo was doing. He supercooled everything, even the air, just so he could then superheat it. If he superheats the air like this, it'll expand. No, it's going to explode. That's why he has that wall, to catch himself so he isn't thrown out of the ring. Crud crud crud. The ice and air seemed to glow orange as Shudo heated it to extreme temperatures. But, if it's an explosion, it's a force. The ice vaporized and the air cracked, unleashing a sonic boom that ripped apart the ground as it exploded. Shudo was pressed against his ice wall instantly, the force making it impossible to see what happened to Izuku. Izuku screamed as he reached out and focused on his barrier, but immediately he could tell it wasn't going to be enough. The blast was stronger than anything he had blocked from Katsuki. A wall wasn't going to cut it. Not if he wanted to protect himself and make sure he won. Then he thought back to earlier in the match. Remembering how to save himself from having to use too much power in his quirk, he had simply redirected Shudo's ice or split it. He had avoided straight up blocking it. A wedge. Think of a wedge. The wedge and dash. That was the last thing Izuku was able to think before he was hit. Midnight screamed as the air blast threw her off her podium, and the crowds in the stands all ducked away or grabbed onto something to keep themselves from getting blown away. 1A also reacted as they desperately tried to keep from getting thrown from their seats. Minoru was not so lucky as he was blown away, only getting saved as Mezub grabbed onto a leg and held him tight. Ochako dove for the ground, pulling Himiko with her, while Tsuyu grabbed a hold of Mei and stuck herself to the nearest chair.
Tenya put an arm out and kept Hitoshi from getting blown backwards.
Soon, the great gusts of air died down, and everyone crawled out from their hiding spaces to see what had happened.
Holy fuck. Toga, please.
Language, Tenya corrected as he rubbed his ringing ears.
Himiko blinked. What? I didn't say any dash.
Ochako gently poke her in the side, yeah, Toga.
Language.
Himiko glared up at Ochako as she pulled herself up and offered her a hand.
You sly little. Pulling Himiko up, Ochako turned back and gasped at the state of the arena.
Even under a cloud of dust, she could tell it was destroyed again. So, did Todoroki just erase Midoriya, or? Denki gulped at the twin glares he got before Ochako and Himiko went back to looking for their friend. As they did, the giant screens replayed what had happened, though this time, in slow mo.
Izuku wasn't sure if he was actually screaming, or if it was just inside his head.
The roar of the air made it impossible to hear anything. All he knew was that he was in agony. He had been able to turn his barrier into a wedged shape, but even with that, the pain in his head was blinding. He felt so sick he wanted to throw up. This was exactly like when he had fought the zero-pointer hat pain, that ice pick to his head was back. This pain had sent him to his knees, making him unable to do anything else. It had ended his run during the entrance exam, but there was one key difference between then and now. Before, he had never experienced it before, so he had been unprepared for it. This time, he had been expecting it, and was prepared to be able to do one last thing before he was out for the count. While his head screamed in pain, Izuku reached out and let what was left of his quirk hit the ice wall behind Shudo. The ice was thick, made to withstand Shudo's attack and keep him from getting thrown out of the ring.
Well, that was something Izuku couldn't let happen.
Pressing against the ice, Izuku dug deep, and silently prayed that Ochako would be merciful later.
Shudo heard the cracking, even over the roar of the air.
Opening his eye, he saw his ice bathed in green light, and then, it was in pieces. Tumbling backwards end over end, Shudo knew he was about to hit either the ground or the wall and desperately worked to lessen that impact. With a growl, and more than a little cursing, Midnight crawled back onto her feet. Not even worrying about her podium, which was a wreck against the arena walls, Midnight hurried towards the ring. Eyes scanning everywhere as she looked for Izuku and Shudo through the dust.
After a blast like that, there's no way either are still in the ring, or what's left of it. Damn these kids.
I'm too young to be going gray worrying about them. After a few more moments of searching, Midnight was finally able to spot Shudo, over halfway to the arena wall, hurriedly climbing out of a mountain of snow he had used to cushion his fall.
Midnight was relieved to see that he looked pretty much unharmed. That's one, now where's that other pain in the ass?
I swear, if that kid got blown into the audience, I'm gonna.
Midnight trailed off. She had been looking around the whole arena trying to find Izuku, that it was only when more of the dust settled that she finally found him. Standing and still in the ring.
His head was down, and his arms hung limply at his side. He was swaying back and forth, and the only way Midnight knew he was actually still even conscious was because his legs were shaking so hard as he kept himself upright. Soon, the crowd around her also started to realize what had happened and also saw Izuku standing alone in the ring, with Shudo far out of bounds.
He's fighting just to stand up, it's taking everything he has left to just. Midnight raised her hand high into the air, Todoroki is out of bound. Midoriya Izuku is the winner. Then, and only then, did Izuku's legs start to give out and let himself fall. Todoroki is out of bound. Midoriya Izuku is the winner. While her classmates reacted to what they had just seen, Ochako wasn't listening.
She was looking right at Izuku, remembering how he looked in the video All Might had shown them after he faced that zero-pointer. Then she was watching him start to fall to the ground.
Instincts took over.
She moved as fast as she possibly could. Tapping her leg with her fingers, she grabbed the railing in front of her and launched herself towards the ring. This time, no one was fast enough to stop her. Only vaguely aware of the startled yells calling her name, Ochako flew down to the ground, straight for Izuku. She wanted to catch him before he hit the ground, but she was too far away. Then right before her eyes, a great pillow of snow formed underneath Izuku and caught him before he fell onto the hard ground. Twisting herself around, Ochako tapped her fingers together and landed just outside the ring. Air. Only contestants are allowed down in the ring. All other students, please remain seated. Ochako ignored present Mike and rushed into the ring, with Shudo coming up alongside her. Deku. You are, Uraraka? Dazed green eyes searched around until they were locked with Ochako's. Oh hey. Hey yourself. Congratulations, by the way. Blinking, Izuku let that sink in. I won? Yep. It took a few seconds, but soon Izuku was laughing and crying again. Kneeling down, Ochako gingerly helped Izuku sit up. Now upright, Izuku looked around, then down. Why am I sitting in snow? I made some to help cushion your fall, Midoriya. Shudo answered, standing next to Ochako. Can you stand? Midnight frowned. It'd be better if you waited for the gurney. Izuku shook his head, and winced at how bad of a decision that was. I want to walk out. Please. Shudo and Ochako glanced at each other and moved to either side of him. Taking an arm, the two helped pick Izuku up and helped support him. Ochako put his arm over her shoulders, while Shudo hesitated for a second. Taking Izuku's hand, he raised it up in victory. The crowd, seeing this, cheered loudly at the great display of sportsmanship. After a bit, Shudo took the arm and put it over his shoulder. Together, the three walked out of the ring and out of the arena. Once they had made it into the hall, and were out of the public eye, Izuku sagged some against them. Hey, we can take a break now if you want, Deku. Izuku shook his head, wincing at the movement. No. I'd rather walk into Recovery Girl's office. Might make the chewing out less bad? Harsh, there's a word I'm looking for. Deserved? Ochako chimed in, a knowing smirk on her face. Don't be mean, Uraraka. I don't deserve any kind of chew, Eiseito. The sneeze hurt Izuku's head. It felt like someone had smacked with a bat. What was worse though was when one of the strips of cloth he had shoved up his nose flew out and landed on the floor, and the other hung out of his other nostril. Izuku gulped. Oh, that's not good. Why do I hear boss music? Ochako blinked down at the bloody cloth and then slowly turned to look at Izuku. Deku. Oh, I'm gonna be in trouble. Shuto nodded. Called that one. Quick, brain, think of an excuse. Kaken did it? Ochako's face flushed red. Grounded. I'm making sure you get grounded. Darn it, brain. The following events after making it to the hallway tunnel were blurry at best for Izuku. He could remember Ochako being very unhappy with him for most of the walk, which he honestly couldn't really blame her for. He recalled running into more of his classmates before they were forced away by Recovery Girl and her cane. Someone had been smacked. Himiko, if he had to guess, because he didn't think any one of the girls in class could swear like Katsuki could. Once he had been laid on the bed and his head hit the pillow, he was out. God damn that old hag and that fucking cane of hers. I'm gonna have a bruise on my hip for sure, Himiko grumbled loudly as she walked back to her seat with the rest of the class. Why the hell couldn't I stay? I want to nurse Izuku back to health. Sad at her missed opportunity, and more than a little jealous that Ochako had gotten to stay, she, along with Shudo and Katsuki, were told to stay since they were all the medal winners and Midnight wanted them all in one place while the arena was fixed and the ceremony was set up. They were supposed to wait in one of the waiting rooms, but Ochako had refused to leave Izuku, so they were just going to wait in the nurse's office. Oh well, I'll just chalk it up to letting Ochako have it as part of her victory over me today. Tomorrow, I'm sneaking out of this place and making a house call. Himiko cackled at her own brilliance. As she turned a corner, she stopped when she almost ran into Tenya, who was busy talking on his phone. Hey there, tall and short-sighted, maybe don't stand in the middle of. Himiko trailed off as she got a good look at Tenya's face. He looked pale and stiffer than usual at least. He was definitely doing everything he could not to look upset.
Tenya? Tenya whispered something into his phone before hanging up.
Ah.
Toga. I need to go.
Go? Nodding hurriedly, Tenya continued, yes, there's been. Tenya's mask almost cracked, but he got himself righted. There's a family matter I have to go take care of.
So I'm going to have to leave early.
Would you please extend my congratulations to Midoriya and Uraraka and let them know I'm sorry for not being able to stay for their medal ceremony? Yeah, sure I can, but, Himiko started, but Tenya, hearing her worried tone, was already hurrying away. Tenya.
Is everything okay? Tenya stopped for a moment.
He didn't turn, but she could see his shoulders shuddering. I'm not sure, I just have to go. But please just tell them it was a family matter. They deserve to enjoy their victory.
With that, Tenya was gone, leaving Himiko alone in the hallway with a dark pit forming in her stomach.
She was already putting the pieces together, and she didn't like the picture she was getting. Tenya had said himself that his brother was in Hosu, and she knew, that was where Stain was. If the two had run into each other.
Oh, Mr. Stain, what did you do? You're leaving now.
While Mrs. Uraraka and Eri desperately fanned a non-responsive Inko, who was slouched in her chair dead to the world, Mr. Uraraka frowned as All Might moved for the door. I just received a message that I have to take care of, All Might said apologetically, looking guiltily at the group.
What could be more important than you making sure Inko is up in time to see her son get that medal? All Might's mind raced.
When he had invited everyone over to watch the sports festival and had decided to sit with them instead of with the other teachers, he had completely forgotten that he was going to be handing out the awards to the students at the end, so he had no excuse on hand for leaving. Fortunately, years of survival in the field made him a quick thinker.
All Might.
Mr. Uraraka tilted his head.
All Might?
Why, yes.
He will be handing out the medals to the finalists.
I have to make sure he's able to. Mr. and Mrs. Uraraka shared looks, so All Might plowed on. You see, he's going to give out the rewards, but he decided that it would be best not to be in the stadium until after everything had concluded. He's a bit of a media magnet and didn't want to take attention away from the students, so it's my job to coordinate with him and some of the other teachers and get him inside without causing a scene.
Good job, Brain.
That's believable, I think. I guess that makes sense, Mrs. Uraraka said after a few moments.
Getting someone that famous in and out must be a hassle if they don't want to cause a stir.
Mr. Uraraka grunted but didn't argue.
Do you think you'll get free in time to make it back?
No. I should have mentioned this from the start, but I completely forgot about it.
I truly am sorry.
It's not us you're going to need to apologize to, Mrs. Uraraka said. She didn't sound mad. She was simply stating a fact, one All Might couldn't argue against. Of that, there is no doubt. When she comes to, you'll explain why I had to step out? Both nodded, and with that, All Might hurried away. She is right, this is very bad form. The cost of a secret identity, I suppose, and not thinking things through. Still, All Might knew he would have to move fast to correct this. He had come to value Inko's company and friendship and wanted to make sure it remained unmarred. Perhaps he could take her to a nice dinner and a night on the town. He knew several excellent 5-star restaurants that would be so easy to get into after all. Shaking his head, All Might hurried on, there would be time to plan that later. Right now, he had to get changed and ready for the ceremony, if there even was going to be one. Perhaps I should check on young Midoriya first to make sure he is even in any shape to take part. Thinking of Izuku, All Might felt his chest swell with pride. Not only had the boy won, but he had been able to help Shudo along the way. At great cost in the end, but he had overcome. Not only his fight with Shudo, but with Katsuki as well. If anything, Izuku showed he had the ability both physically and mentally to overcome great adversity to win. Though All Might was sure Izuku would be the most beat-up winner of a sports festival in recent memory, but sometimes that was the cost of being number one.
Definitely don't tell him that just yet. The boy doesn't need me reinforcing that getting hurt is okay, any more than I might have already done. Aizawa did have a point there, I suppose, and I don't need Recovery Girl beating me over the head with her cane, again. Still, while it might not have been a pretty win, and his opponents will most definitely be in better shape, Izuku had won, which meant All Might now had to prepare. The time to pass on one for all was at hand. He couldn't do it now, of course, but it needed to be soon. But when? If Izuku suddenly started displaying strength and power he hadn't before, it would immediately draw attention. Also, there was a good chance the first time he used it things could get messy, so giving it to him right before class was a no-go. All Might didn't want to think what would happen if Izuku accidentally blew a hole through a wall, or worse, accidentally activated it while training in class and hurt another student. No, All Might needed a time where he could be with Izuku and have enough time to help him get adjusted. But when? When would a time like that ever come up? Suddenly, All Might smiled. There was a time like that, now that he actually thought about it, and it wasn't that far away. When Izuku finally came to, the pain in his head was mostly gone. The sharp stabs into his frontal lobe were now more a dull ache. Like a bad toothache. Gingerly, Izuku tried to sit up, but he fell back into his pillow after only getting his head and shoulders up. His whole body felt very, very heavy, and he didn't have the strength to move it. Deku! Ochako was out of her chair in a flash and by his side. Easy there. You're back in Recovery Girl's clinic. Looking around, Izuku confirmed he was indeed back and in a new sweatshirt too. Oh no, she's not going to be happy. You're darn right I'm not, Recovery Girl curtly said from her desk. If you weren't my patient I'd cane you for being so reckless. Izuku chuckled softly, then hooray for convenient excuses. Don't get smug, Deku. I just might borrow her cane and do it myself. Izuku gasped in mock horror. You wouldn't. When Ochako raised an eyebrow, Izuku sighed in defeat. Yeah, you would. Darn right I would, Ochako confirmed firmly with a wicked smile. For the love of God, I'm going to fucking barf. Ochako's face soured while Izuku blinked in confusion. Wait, Kaken's here, too? Doing his best to look around, Izuku found Katsuki leaning up against a wall and Shudo sitting on one of the beds. Why are you all here? Shudo answered, since we're all medal winners, they wanted us in the same spot, and since Uraraka refused to leave, Ochako blushed, we were allowed to stay here instead of a waiting room. They've been fixing the arena after our match, but I imagine we'll be getting called up soon. Katsuki growled, I don't see why I have to be here. I don't want the fucking thing. Young man, will you stop acting like a perpetual child? You're embarrassing yourself. Katsuki got off the wall. You wanna go, Granny? Recovery Girl huff, got out of her chair and calmly walked up to Katsuki, while everyone else in the room watched. Katsuki blinked, not actually expecting the old woman to make a move like this. Then, while keeping her gaze locked with Katsuki, Recovery Girl lifted her cane up and jammed the end into his foot. Goddammit. You remind me a lot of another hot-headed student that went to this school. That bad attitude of his sure hasn't helped him at all. Still lives under someone else's shadow. Shudo, Izuku, and Katsuki all listened to that. Get your head on straight, or you're going to be following behind someone for the rest of your career. Izuku was shocked at how brave and cool Recovery Girl was. He was also shocked when Katsuki looked at him after she had finished. Their eyes met and they just looked at each other for a few moments before Katsuki turned away. Fine, whatever. Not worth the hassle. Recovery Girl nodded, good. If it helps your ego, think of it as motivation to come back stronger next time. Katsuki huffed but didn't argue. Ochako was a little disappointed that Katsuki seemed to be able to see reason. This meant she was going to have to share a podium with him after all. Of all the times for him to be reasonable. Midoriya, Shuto began slowly. Izu turned his head to look over at the other boy. Do you feel like you'll be able to attend the medal ceremony? An excellent question, young Todoroki. Everyone jumped in surprise, except Izuku, who couldn't, as All Might, in full costume, flung open the door and slid in.
I am here to check on my students like a responsible teacher.
All Might. Izuku smiled happily. Ochako smirked.
Even though they saw the man practically every day, Izuku still got excited seeing his hero.
It was kind of adorable.
Oh, for the love of, this is a clinic.
Save the showing off for the press.
All Might wilted under Recovery Girl's chiding, but he quickly recovered and turned towards the others. I wanted to come see if everyone was ready for the ceremony. You four fought hard today, and it's only right that all of you get the recognition you deserve. Looking at the first three, Ochako and Katsuki had had plenty of time to recover from their matches and were looking good to go. Shudo had been able to walk away from his match with only a few injuries, so his treatment had been quick. He had a swollen and bruised jaw from the massive punches Izuku had been able to land, but besides that, he was fine. Then his eyes fell on Izuku, who smiled up at him from his bed.
What about you, young Midoriya? Are you ready to go? Izuku started to nod. Yes, I am dash.
No, he is not, Recovery Girl interrupted. After his last treatment, he doesn't even have the strength to sit up, much less walk all the way down and stand long enough to get his medal. Izuku frowned and gripped the sheets hard as he tried to pull himself up, only to fall back and have his head land on his pillow, making the dull toothache pain he had before start to throb more sharply.
You had to drain him that much to heal him? He didn't look anywhere near as bad as he did after his match with young Bakugou.
While this student of yours was able to get away with not getting too burned up, the same couldn't be said about his head. He had another concussion I had to fix. I didn't see his nose bleed, though.
A couple of cold glares got directed at Izuku, who eeped and tried to sink into the bed.
That's because he had the bright idea to clog up his nose so the judges couldn't tell how bad he was.
Ah.
A very a very unsafe decision, young Midoriya. As your teacher, I must say that doing such things is bad.
Very bad. I may make you write a report on how bad that was.
The cold glares that had been directed at Izuku were now directed at All Might, who was starting to sweat a little.
Izuku, not wanting to see his hero get chewed out, quickly intervened. Well, maybe Uraraka could float me. That way I could still go to the ceremony.
Recovery Girl shook her head. And have you floating around like a balloon in a state where you couldn't even protect yourself if you got loose?
Absolutely not.
It wasn't that she didn't want Izuku to be able to go, but she was not going to skirt her responsibilities, especially after Izuku had pulled a fast one on her.
Ochako watched as Izuku deflated and looked away.
She hated this. While she really didn't like what he had done, Izuku had still won. He deserved to have this moment.
He'd worked too hard not to be recognized now. What about a wheelchair? That should be fine, right?
Everyone turned to look at Recovery Girl as she thought about that. If one of you doesn't mind pushing him dash.
I don't, Ochako's quickly reply. Okay, that should be fine then. Excellent. Then in that case, when young Midoriya is ready, go ahead and make your way to the arena. Everything is all set up and ready to go.
After Izuku was forced to come to terms that he was not going to be able to move himself into the chair Recovery Girl provided, he relented to getting carried into it. Katsuki flat out refused to help, and while Shudo got up to lend a hand, Ochako beat into it. Swinging one of Izuku's arms over her shoulder so she could support his back and putting an arm just underneath the back of his knees, Ochako picked Izuku up and carried him over to his wheelchair. Izuku fought the blush that suddenly started to spread over his face as he realized Ochako had him in a princess carry. Uraraka is so strong, and firm, and soft. Before he could think more on how nice it felt to be held by her, Ochako gently put him into the chair and pulled back with a smile. There we go. Now let's get you all fixed up. This mostly involved her straightening Izuku's sweatshirt collar. Satisfied, Ochako moved back around and got ready to push Izuku to the arena. She blinked at the strange look Katsuki was giving her.
What? The fuck, didn't you just float him?
Ignoring Katsuki's silly question, after all, it wasn't like Izuku was that heavy. The four left the clinic and made their way for the arena. For most of the walk, the four stayed silent, though Izuku would look at the three around him. When he caught Ochako's eye, she smiled at him, which he hoped meant the chewing out he was probably going to get wouldn't be so bad.
And it wasn't like he didn't have some ammo of his own.
Her fight with Himiko had been exceptionally brutal. He could probably use that to protect himself. Katsuki was still not happy with having to go to the ceremony, but after Recovery Girl's talk, he at least wasn't putting up a fight or making a scene.
He was actually calm-ish. Izuku bet that it wouldn't take much to set him off.
At that point, the school would probably have to chain him down to the podium or something to give him his medal.
The mental image of Katsuki chained and maybe even gagged brought a chuckle to Izuku.
Kakin would be like one of those monsters you see in the old pre-Quirk movies, like the one with the giant gorilla.
Izuku's small laugh got Katsuki's attention, but Izuku quickly turned away.
While seeing Katsuki chained up might be funny, being the reason why he had to get chained up probably wouldn't be as fun.
Shudo at first looked like his normal self calm and quiet, but as Izuku looked closer, he couldn't help but think Shudo looked like he was thinking. Izuku swore he could see the gears turning in the other boy's head. He imagined that after the events of the day, Shudo probably had a great deal to think about. I just hope I was able to help, and not cause him more grief. As they turned the corner, Izuku hissed. Speaking of grief.
Blocking their way stood Endeavor, smiling proudly.
Ochako blinked and came to a stop, sure that Izuku was about to start fanboying at seeing the number 2 hero.
However, she was a little startled when not only did he not start to openly show any kind of excitement, but seemed guarded. Even Katsuki seemed a little on edge, while Shudo regarded his father with a cold, questioning gaze.
Okawe, am I the only one with no idea what's going on?
Shudo, I'm glad I caught you before your ceremony.
You didn't return to your classmates after your match. When Shudo didn't immediately answer, Ochako gulped nervously.
We decided to wait together in Recovery Girls' Clinic to make sure we could all go together, sir. Piercing blue eyes glanced over at Ochako, making her flinch. Ah, I see. You were relatively uninjured from your last match, so I didn't even think to look for you there, Shudo, so these are your classmates.
Perhaps UA's standards have not dropped as far as I feared.
You too. His gaze fell directly between Ochako and Katsuki, put on a good show, worthy of the bronze medal.
Was that a compliment or an insult?
Ochako wasn't sure, so she decided to not dig too deep.
Katsuki growled, but didn't say anything else. Then Endeavor looked down at Izuku with a very scrutinizing eye. You were able to do well, within the rules of the tournament. Even if you can't even stand to receive your gold, you fought hard. You were even able to get my son to finally embrace his true power. Perhaps your mother wasn't just talking nonsense, or at least mostly. Before Izuku could even ask about what Endeavor meant by that, Shudo stepped forward. Why are you here? If you wanted to tell me how disappointed you are that I didn't win, you could do it later. Endeavor smirked. Not at all, Shudo. Not at all.
True, if you had used your fire from the start, today would have gone very differently, but you did use your fire today. Today, you lost the battle, but you took your first steps toward winning the war. You've embraced your power, and now you must learn to control it. In your fight, all you were doing was letting it burn out of control or just flinging it around. Fire is dangerous, Shudo, and takes a great deal of concentration and control to master, but these are things I can teach you. Things that you are now ready to learn. Today, you have started on the path to become my legacy. The silence that followed felt long and awkward. Katsuki sneered, but didn't interject, while Ochako kept looking from Shudo to Endeavor, wishing she knew what was even going on. When she felt the wheelchair in her hands start to shake a little, she glanced down and almost gave a startled gasp. Izuku looked pissed, and even if he was too weak to move himself, he could still shake with anger. He was looking up at Endeavor with such resentment that Ochako wasn't sure what to do. She couldn't think of the last time Izuku had made a face like that. Shudo finally spoke, breaking the silence. I've accepted that this fire is part of me. I won't run from it, nor shirk the responsibility. I now have to learn to control it. I still need to figure out what that means for me, and for you. This does not mean I've accepted you or your legacy.
If I do decide to learn from you, it will be to become the hero I want to be, not the hero you want me to be.
Father and son stared at each other before Shudo turned away. We should get going, or we will be late. Ochako, trying not to look like she was hurrying, followed after Shudo as he walked around his father, with Katsuki bringing up the rear. She made a point not to look over at the hero so she couldn't see just how he was taking that reply from Shudo. Ochako was just focused on reaching the next turn in the hall and putting that between them and Endeavor. Just turn the corner and get away from whatever the hell that was. Just keep walking, almost there. Endeavor. Damn it, Baku, wait. Ochako had been ready to scream at Katsuki for speaking up. The boy just couldn't keep his mouth shut. However, when she looked at him, he was looking down, equally surprised that someone had talked. It took a second for it to click that it wasn't Katsuki that had spoken up. Or Shudo for that matter. Deku. Izuku had turned his head, and was looking Endeavor right in the eye. Todoroki is strong. I'm sure he's going to become a great hero.
One that will be remembered for a long, long time. He'll become stronger than you, because he isn't you.
Ochako just about tripped on her own jaw as she rushed to get around the corner. When they finally did and it was clear Endeavor was not going to follow after them, Ochako finally breathed and then rounded on Izuku.
Deku. You can't just say that. That's a professional hero and Todoroki's father, and why would you even? Would you rather I'd lied?
The amount of frost coming from Izuku's voice was shocking. I mean, Ochako was at a complete loss, and then Katsuki laughed.
Fucking hell, Deku, when did your balls finally drop? While Ochako was ready to tell Katsuki off for being so vulgar, Shudo cut in. I'm sorry you had to see that. My father and I have some personal issues. I see.
Katsuki clicked his tongue with a harsh click. It sounds like you should just tell your old man to fuck off instead of letting Deka here do it for you.
Shudo frowned. I don't think that's the right answer. Todoroki, you should do whatever you feel is right, Izuku offered.
I felt that not using my fire was right, though, until you showed me I was wrong. I still have to figure some things out.
Izuku smiled up at Shudo. I'm sure you will. The confidence in Izuku's voice helped Shudo feel like he really could get everything figured out. Eventually.
Fireworks exploded high in the sky as Midnight stood and addressed the crowd. In front of her, the first-year students stood grouped together while further back, reporters and cameramen filmed and took pictures of everything. It is time to bring today's UA Sports Festival to a close. All of the first year's events have been completed. So now, it is time to begin the award ceremony. The crowd exploded into cheers, happily clapping as behind Midnight, Izuku, Shudo, Ochako, and Katsuki were lifted up on extending platforms as around them confetti popped up into the air. On the third-place podium, Ochako smiled brightly as she waved at the crowd, while beside her, Katsuki snarled and hunched over with his hands in his pockets. Higher up on the second-place podium, Shudo did what he always did and stood calmly, not showing much emotion or really acknowledging the crowds. Finally up on his first-place podium, Izuku sat, parked in his wheelchair. Grinning ear to ear and with fresh tears streaming down his cheeks that he couldn't even hide because he couldn't move. And now, to hand out the medals. They will be presented by the number one hero himself. Up high on the stadium's roof, the distinct silhouette appeared before the crowd, quickly followed by the trademark laugh everyone knew and loved. Hearing that laugh, the crowd's cheers took on a completely new life, becoming almost deafening. Smiling his trademark giant grin, All Might leapt from the roof and out towards the arena floor. Our very own, All Might. I am here to hand out the medals. As All Might landed in front of everyone, he and Midnight shared quick embarrassed looks before Midnight bowed slightly. Sorry, I talked over you. From the crowd of students, Midnight heard a very distinct laugh. She didn't even have to look to know who it was. Great. I get to deal with that later too. Toga isn't going to let this go for at least a week. All Might and Midnight quickly recovered with Midnight holding out a tray with the medals on it. Why don't we get started? All Might, if you would please hand these out, starting with third place. Nodding, All Might took the 2 bronze medals and stepped up to Ochako and Katsuki. First, he turned towards Katsuki, who glared angrily at the bronze medal in All Might's hand. I can tell this isn't the result you were hoping for today, young Bakugou. However, do not forget that you will continue to get stronger. When you return as a second year, use this day to push you further towards the top. Katsuki's face didn't change, but he bowed his head a very small amount, so that All Might could put the medal around his neck. Giving Katsuki a pat on the shoulder, All Might turned and faced Ochako next, who was beaming with pride. A pride that was reflected back from All Might. Young Uraraka, today you showed great ingenuity and perseverance. Take pride in what you accomplished here today, for you have earned every bit of recognition it brings you. When All Might held the medal up, Ochako bowed her head and tried her best not to start crying as he put it on her. Thank you, All Might. Placing his hand on her shoulder, All Might continued, going forward, you must learn that no quirk will always guarantee you victory. Even if you are able to touch someone, do not assume that will mean victory. Always be ready for the unexpected. That way you won't be caught off guard again. Ochako nodded as she thought back to what led to her defeat. Yes, sir. I understand. Satisfied, All Might took the silver medal handed to him and walked up to Shudo, who bowed his head. Young Todoroki, I think today you overcame more than just some sporting events. Today was the first time I've ever seen you use that fire of yours. Even when using it earlier would have made you journey to the finals much easier. With the silver around his neck, Shudo nodded and spoke softly so that only All Might could hear him. Midoriya was able to break through to me and spoke to me about things I had not considered, and helped me remember why I am here. I wish to become a hero. Someone like you, All Might. I can tell why you decided to train him. All Might, though he did not answer directly, let his eye briefly look over at Izuku before returning to Shudo. A hero must have a clear mind and heart. I can tell there are still things you wish to work through, but today I think a great fog has been lifted. I am sure you will figure this out and do what you need to do. Taking the gold medal, All Might stood before Izuku, looking down at him. Sitting in his wheelchair, Izuku couldn't do much but smiled up at All Might. It wasn't exactly a flawless victory, but Izuku had done it. Young Midoriya, you won't fall out of that chair if I put this on you. Right? Izuku burst out laughing. Uraraka strapped me in, so I think I'm fine. Smiling brightly, All Might draped the gold medal over Izuku's shoulders. Young man, today you accomplished something spectacular. Today, you stood in front of the world and declared to everyone, I am here. You showed us that the future is indeed bright. All Might noted the tears that were still streaming down Izuku's face, if a bit wet. Thank you, All Might. Still, going forward, as you continue to achieve your accomplishments, perhaps it would be wise to take measures to make sure you are in better condition to enjoy the fruits of your labor. If not just for yourself, but others you would share your life with. Izuku nodded. Good. Very good, young Midoriya. Before I forget. After today, you and your classmates will be getting internship offers very soon. After a performance like you had today, young Midoriya, I imagine you will be getting quite a number of them yourself. So? Pulling out an envelope, All Might smirked as he slid it into Izuku's hand. I'll be a little sneaky today and go ahead and get my request out first. There were several audible gasps from the crowd and the other students. Ochako looked over at the two, wide-eyed, while Katsuki's sneer was gone as he watched them carefully. Shudo didn't seem surprised at all. While Izuku's jaw was still hanging open as he tried to comprehend just what All Might had done, All Might just smiled and winked. With that said, All Might turned towards the crowd of students. I give you, your winners. But students, do not forget. Any one of you could be the next ones to stand up here in victory. Continue to improve and learn from today. Climb even higher as you work towards your goals. You are the future heroes of our world, and the future is indeed bright. Plus Ultra. All around, the students and crowds echoed All Might's cheer, Plus Ultra. With an annoyed growl, Tomura reached up and shut the TV off. Sitting in his chair, he let his hands fall to his side as he kept himself from destroying the TV in anger. That brat won. Of all the brats that could have won, it had to be that green one.
The sports festival had soured his mood. Absently, he picked at the bandages he still had to wear.
Until they came off, he was told to stay put and let Kurogiri take care of everything.
It was annoying.
He wanted to be doing something, not this sit and wait crap.
With a grunt, Tamura got up and walked back into the bar looking for something to drink. As he did, the air behind the bar twisted, and the black shadow of Kurogiri appeared in his bartender's suit. "I see the sports festival has ended. You made sure to watch till the end as master instructed?"
Tamura waved him off as he reached behind the counter and pulled out a bottle and picked up a glass. "Yes.
As much as I hated it, I did." "I'm happy to hear that. Did you see or learn anything from it?"
Tamura paused as he started to pour his drink. "Maybe.
Some of those brats don't act very heroic." "Oh? An interesting observation.
I'm sure Master would be interested in hearing more about that."
"Anything else?" "I hate that Midoriya brat. I want to kill him. I want to make him suffer."
Kurogiri nodded, but wasn't that surprised. This was the same thing Tamura had said about Izuku ever since the failed assault on the USJ. Kurogiri was about to ask if there was anything else, but Tamura kept talking. He said he and his little classmates were the future. "I want to show the world they have no future.
Not with those brats, and not with him. You're thinking ahead, Shigaraki."
"I'm sure Master will be happy to hear this."
Pouring his drink, Tamura took a sip. "What about you? Find anyone with promise while you were out in the city?"
"Mostly leads right now, but very promising ones.
I have made contact with a man called Jiren. He's a broker who specializes in information. He comes highly recommended and has said he will help us look for good talent. He has info on a couple of special contacts that I think we will be interested in.
I have also personally been in contact with someone that may be a great addition to us."
"Oh? Stain, the hero killer. I located him and extended an offer.
He seemed interested at the very least."
Tamura swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "The hero killer, huh?
He's pretty famous, and he's been hunting heroes for some time now."
"As I said, someone with that kind of experience could be an excellent addition." "I suppose. Anything else?" "Perhaps, though it doesn't have anything to do with us at the moment. Jiren offered the information to me after we had struck our deal." "Are you familiar with the Yakuza?" Tamura smirked. "Yakuza, they're just a gang or something, right? Are they even still around?"
"I thought the heroes wiped them out years ago. They were more than just a gang. For a time, they were a whole organization with connection to everything, from gambling, to police, and even politics."
"For a time, at least. Their organization has been greatly reduced since heroes started to become commonplace."
"They may not have the same reach, but they are still around."
"A bunch of fossils that don't know their time is done, whatever. What information did Jiren give you about them?"
"Apparently, their leader has a very sizable bounty out for information on his missing daughter. So after he got the call, Tenya said he had to go. Said it was some kind of family thing," Himiko explained as everyone sat in their class waiting room. Now changed back into their school uniforms, everyone was waiting for Aizawa to come by and send them off. Izuku, still in his wheelchair, frowned at Himiko's news. "I hope everything is alright." Ochako crossed her arms. "And Ida didn't give you any clue what the family thing could be?"
"Nope.
He just wanted me to pass it along if you guys asked." "Oh, and not to worry about it. Enjoy your victory, and all that jazz." Hitoshi added, "I'm sure he'll call us if something comes up."
"I say give him time to sort whatever is going on."
Tsuyu agreed, albeit slowly.
"I suppose that's all we can do."
"I just wish we had some more information, Karo."
"I suppose we'll just wait then," Izuku said before fighting back a yawn.
Himiko, seeing an opportunity to change the subject, pounced.
"Oh poor Izuku.
You're so tired after kicking Baku bitch dash." There was a loud growl from Natsuki, which Himiko ignored and shouts, "Butts.
I was hoping we could celebrate your victory,
privately. Ochako rolled her eyes at the overly seductive tone Himiko was throwing out, but before she could offer a rebuke, Izuku yawned and said, "Unless you know a way to celebrate on a bed, I don't think I'm in any shape to party right now." Himiko squeaked while Ochako wished she had a wall to bang her head against. "Deku! Don't feed her like that. And, oh my god, I think she's about to start drooling." Ochako made a point of latching onto the wheelchair handles. "We can think of something later. When all of us are here and we can all celebrate together." Izuku nodded, "That's true. We should wait for Ida to get back and we need to let Hatsum know, too." While Himiko pouted at missing such a perfect opportunity, she tried to play it off. "Just the same, I can't really do anything tonight anyway. I'm pretty sure Midnight is gonna be knocking down my door to make sure we have our talk." Wincing, Ochako gave Himiko a sympathetic look, knowing she probably was a big reason for that. Himiko noticed and waved her off. "It is what it is. We can do something later. Besides, it's not like I haven't done worse things than today. It shouldn't be that bad." That got a couple of looks from her friends as Himiko realized she said that last bit out loud. Maybe just ignore that last bit." Soon after, the door to the waiting room opened and Aizawa, in all his bandaged-up glory, walked in. Everyone immediately came to attention as he addressed the class. "Everyone, you all did well today. You'll have the next 2 days off, so use that time to reflect and recover." "Yes, sensei. When you get back, we will have the intern requests from the hero agencies ready for you to go over." "Izuku! Mom!" The class was only a few yards out of the stadium before Inko rushed forward and wrapped Izuku up in a tight hug. "My poor boy. I'm so proud of you." While his mother was hugging him, Izuku could hear a few snickers from the rest of his classmates, making him blush red. "Mom, please." Ochako stifled a small laugh. It was so adorable to see Inko and Izuku together. However, her laugh was short-lived as she was tackled by her own parents and wrapped up in a hug as well. Ack! When Inko finally pulled away, Eri climbed up and sat in Izuku's lap. "You guys were so cool." "It was scary, but cool." There was a small chorus of AWS from some of the girls as they crowded around to get their chance to finally see Eri, who buried herself into Izuku's side. "It's okay, Eri. These are my classmates. They're really friendly." Eri waved shyly while keeping herself pressed firming into Izuku, which got even more coos from the girls and a few more AWS from the boys. While most of the class introduced themselves to Eri, All Might, back in his normal suit and shrunken form, jogged over. "I'm glad I was able to catch you all." Inko looked up and gave All Might a slightly icy look. "I take it you were able to take care of your business then?" Yes. Yes, I was. Please accept my most humblest apologies. I should have mentioned beforehand I was going to have to leave early. I fully intend to make this up to you." Inko nodded. "Yes, I'm sure you will." Himiko squinted her eyes as she looked at All Might. "I swear I've seen him around the school before." "Oh well, he does act as a UA scout, so I'm sure he's popped up from time to time," Izuku quickly explained. Fortunately, that seemed to be enough for everyone. Inko kept a cold gaze on All Might for a little longer before she sighed and smiled. "Were you able to at least see the award ceremony?" Before All Might could answer, Eri nodded. "I saw him on the field." "He saw for sure Mrs. Midoriya." All Might smiled and patted Eri on the head. "You saw me, huh? You must have great eyes then." Eri smiled shyly. "You were on the big TVs when you were handing out the medals." If Izuku wasn't too tired to move, he would have gone stiff. Ochako and All Might made up for that as they froze in shock. Momo knelt down next to Eri. It was All Might that handed out the medal though. Eri nodded. "I know," then pointed up. "Mr. Yagi is All Might." There was a moment of silence before everyone erupted into laughter, except Izuku, Ochako, and All Might himself. They were all screaming into the same void in their heads. Ichiru roughed up Eri's hair. "Come on kid, All Might is huge. And Mr. Yagi is, not as huge." Eri waved her arms about as she argued back.
He's just pretending to be small.
The mental void was now echoing with screams as Izuku, Ochako, and All Might did their best not to let any emotion show.
Everyone from the class simply laughed before they began to disperse, all headed home.
With a wave, Hitoshi wished his friends a good night and that he'd be available in their chat if anyone wanted to talk.
After saying goodbye, Izuku sighed.
He was grateful that no one seemed to believe Eri, though he was worried at just how Eri seemed to know.
What was the giveaway?
When he asked, Eri tapped her chin. They looked the same.
This time Inko chuckled. Oh, to be a child again. They have the most wonderful imaginations.
With his mom now also showing she didn't believe Eri, Izuku began to wonder if All Might should do something else to make sure no one recognized him. Maybe All Might should start wearing glasses when he's all shrunk down.
That's a good way to hide your identity. Ochako sighed when no one seemed to take Eri seriously. If that was how the secret got out, it would be embarrassing.
As she was about to walk back over to Izuku and start pushing him to the exit, Himiko and Tsuyu tapped her on the shoulder. Yeah?
Tsuyu glanced over at Izuku before looking back at Ochako, and asked in a hushed voice, You're still going to talk with Midoriya, right? Ochako frowned. You were going to talk to him, right? Himiko prodded. Under her friend's intense gazes, Ochako relented and nodded, yes. Yes, I will talk to Deku about everything. I promise. Just not tonight. He's so exhausted right now. It's not the right time. Tomorrow then, Karo? You need to do it before we get back to class. Ochako knew they were right.
Waiting too long was not the right thing to do here, before class starts up again.
I promise. Satisfied, Tsuyu waved goodbye and left. Himiko glanced to her side and sighed. Ochako followed her eyes and saw Midnight leaning against a wall watching them. Again, sorry.
Himiko rolled her eyes but kept smiling. It is what it is. Even if we didn't have our little scrap, Ochako laughed at their fight being called a scrap. I was going to have to talk to her tonight anyway.
She's gonna want to hear about Izuku letting me have some of his blood to transform.
But hey, I get to surprise her about letting everyone know how my quirk works, so that should be fun. Himiko, after saying a quick goodbye to Izuku and his mother, and giving Eri a little wave, she turned to walk back to her date with Destiny with Midnight.
Ochako though coughed into her hand, getting her attention. Hey, before you go? Yeah? About your quirk and needing blood. Himiko raised an eyebrow. Yeah, what about it? The stuff the school gives you. You don't really like it, right? You're always making faces when you drink it. Himiko nodded, not sure where this was going. Yeah, it's artificial.
They make it or grow it somehow.
Not sure how.
It doesn't taste that great, but it does the job.
Well, if you ever want something not fake, I wouldn't mind letting you have some. If that's something you can do, or want.
Himiko's mind ground to a halt. There was no way this was happening. When Izuku had made the offer, Himiko was sure it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Finding someone willing to share their blood with her, here was no way, that it could happen again.
And yet, here she was, getting the offer again on the same day.
Her heart swelled, and she was sure she was close to tears. Thank you, Ochako.
That's really kind of you.
Ochako smiled, a bright, dazzling, almost blinding smile. I'm happy to be there for you, Toga.
We're friends, so just let me know what I can do. Talk to you later? Himiko nodded and then Ochako was gone, walking back over to Izuku and her parents and leaving Himiko alone to try to come to terms. The best she could come up with was that Izuku and Ochako were freaks. Two people born with too much kindness and goodness jammed into their hearts and souls.
They were both 1 in a trillion, and she had somehow gotten 2 of them as her friends.
Her heart was already swollen and overflowing with love. Izuku had done something to her when they first met, and then again today. Now, Ochako was adding herself to the mix. At this rate, she just might break, and she had no idea what would happen if that happened.
And truthfully, Himiko kind of wanted to know what would happen.
Oh boy, I've got a lot to talk with Midnight about.
Hope she's ready for a long night. All Might was the first to leave, wishing everyone a good evening before walking off to waves and wishes of having a good night. With only the Midoriyas and Urarakas left, the two families made their way back to Inko and Izuku's apartment, with the plan being that they'll stop there first before Ochako and her parents' head to the train station, so she could see her parents off before heading home to her apartment. Ochako had hoped her parents might be able to stay longer, but just getting away for the day had been all they could afford, which she understood.
So the group made their way home, with Eri now napping soundly in the wheelchair with Izuku.
Ochako smiled down at the pair as she pushed. Her father had offered to take up the job, but Ochako said it was fine. It wasn't like they were heavy.
You know, Deku, you can nod off too if you want.
I'm sure you could use the extra sleep. Nah, I'll sleep when I get home.
I'm kinda enjoying the ride right now.
Ochako snorted, you're lucky Eri's with you.
Otherwise, you'd be going for a real ride right about now.
Mom, help!
Izuku cried out in mock terror. Inko looked back at the two before turning back around.
Gasp! Betrayed by my own mother. Oh, you be quiet. You'll wake up Eri, Ochako chided softly.
Izuku nodded, she did have a busy day today.
It's no wonder she fell asleep. Says the boy whose body is so exhausted he can't even move. Hey, you got healed by Recovery Girl today, too.
Heck, we both had to deal with Todoroki today.
Ochako nodded, it was a fair point. She was almost certain once she fell into her bed she was going to be lights out.
Maybe, but you actually won your match.
You had Todoroki countered perfectly with your psychokinesis. You could just move his ice out of the way or break it before it reached you. Izuku chuckled, honestly, I got pretty lucky at the start. He's been known to throw out a lot more ice when he attacks. If he had hit me with that kind of scale, I don't think I wouldn't have been able to last like I did. I think almost getting beat by you spooked him a little and got him to act more conservatively than normal. Maybe, or it could have been you calling him out at the start. He didn't want to give Midnight Sensei a reason to think he was getting too cold.
That's a good point. I wasn't actually planning on doing that. I was kinda not happy with getting called out like that by Midnight. It didn't seem fair. Ochako laughed, you were a little sassy then. Speaking of plans, you were trying to get Todoroki to use his fire, right?
Yeah.
We talked a bit before the tournament started.
He mentioned he didn't like using his fire for personal reasons. Recalling the brief snippet that she and the class had heard from the mic Kyuka had been plugged into, that fit. Speaking of, I'm going to have to tell Deku what the class heard, that's not going to be fun.
Later.
Worry about it later.
Does that have anything to do with what happened when we ran into Endeavor?
Izuku was quiet for a bit before he spoke, Uraraka, that's not something for me to talk about with anyone that wasn't there.
I'm sorry. It's all right. Everyone is entitled to their own secrets, after all. Both knew the feeling of having to keep secrets.
So what was your plan after you got him to use his fire?
Did he just say eh?
Yeah, your plan to counter his fire, you had one, right?
The tone shift in Ochako's voice made Izuku shudder.
Yes, I did have a plan, and I'd like to add, it worked out perfectly.
I won. The false bravado didn't fool Ochako for a second. And what was the plan exactly?
Well, after watching your match, it was pretty clear Todoroki wasn't that great at hand-to-hand fighting.
Ochako nodded.
So the plan was don't get hit by the fire, punch him a lot, then win.
Deku.
Yes, Uraraka, my bestest friend in the whole wide world?
Izuku replied with the best cutesy voice he could muster.
Ochako pressed her forehead into the back of the wheelchair and groaned.
That isn't a plan. No, it isn't, Deku. It was a plan, and I won.
Ochako held up her hand and extended her pointer finger. 1. You got hit by his fire.
Not directly.
2. You only punched him like what?
2 times? Maybe 3. I think that still counts as a lot. 3, winning is a goal, not a plan. Let's just agree to disagree. There was an almost audible snap as Ochako's patience finally cracked. Grounded. You are grounded. Degree. Mild lemon warning.
It was evening now, and a loud crack of thunder made Ochako wince as she looked outside. Soon after she had made it home, after making sure to give her parents an extra hard hug and watching their train leave, the skies had opened up and what started as a heavy rain turned torrential.
Now it might as well have been a monsoon with all the water coming down. The weather reports had said this rain was going to last almost until the next morning. Normally, the weather wouldn't be bothering her if not for one key issue. Boy, it's really coming down, isn't it? Izuku was now stuck in her apartment. When they had made it back to his home, Inko and Eri had gone inside, but Izuku had been adamant that he was going to walk with Ochako and make sure she got home safely since it was going to be after dark before she made it home. Izuku had the curtains pulled aside as he stood by the glass doors. You wouldn't happen to have an umbrella I could borrow? Ochako looked at Izuku, then back out to the storm. I am not sending you home in that storm. Are you sure? I don't mind a little rain. Absolutely not. You'll get swept away for sure. Izuku laughed. I've always wanted to try surfing. Huffing, Ochako pushed Izuku away from the window. No. You call your mother and let her know where you are and that you'll be staying here tonight. With a chuckle, Izuku bowed dramatically. Right away, my lady. You, Ochako groaned as she waved Izuku away. Smirking, Izuku turned and went to grab his cell phone, leaving Ochako to figure out what to do. It was only after she had sent him away that a sudden and slightly horrifying realization came to her. There was nowhere for Izuku to sleep. When she spent the night over at his place, there had been a couch that someone could sleep on. Her apartment didn't have a couch. Or a futon. Or really anything that could be used as a bed. In fact, there wasn't even a separate room. Her apartment was small. A bedroom that opened out to a short hallway/kitchen and behind a door her little bathroom and laundry room. That was it. So really, there was only one place where Izuku could sleep. In her bedroom. In her single bed. With her. Oh. While Ochako stood, frozen in place, Izuku walked back in, called my mom and let her know. So, where am I sleeping, anyway? Ochako blinked and before her mind could tell her any better, she pointed at her bed. Without a second thought, Izuku turned and fell back onto it, laying on his back. Ah. This is comfy. Ochako, seeing Izuku lying on her bed, felt her face flush, her heart race, and her whole body heat up. When he pushed himself up onto his elbow and smiled up at her, something else started to stir inside her, too. Something primal. Are you okay, Uraraka? You're looking a little red. Ochako squeaked before forcing herself to calm down, though it was like holding back an avalanche with an umbrella. Yes. Totally fine. Not thinking about naughty things at all. Izuku titled his head to the side. Huh? Nothing. Oh, okay, Izuku shrugged, not paying attention to the fact that Ochako was getting redder and redder. More and more thoughts invaded her mind, latching on and digging in. Thoughts she knew she needed to get rid of. Gosh, is this what's it like to be Toga? She's practically thinking about sex all the time. Oh no, I said the word. No, don't think about sex, no thinking about sex with Izuku. That primal heat spread further throughout her body, heating her up to the point she was sure she was going to start burning up. She needed to get to sleep. Let this get out of her system. It had been building up throughout the day, watching Izuku compete and show off just how incredible he was. That, and all the times his shirt had come off, all the times he was in front of her showing off those damn chiseled abs and sculpted chest. Stop thinking about Deku's sexy body. Don't call it sexy. Sleep. She needed sleep. She needed to go to sleep before something happened. Which led to another problem. She had just given Izuku her bed. Without meaning to, she asked the question in her head out loud. So where am I going to sleep?
Without missing a beat, Izuku answered immediately while he patted the spot next to him.
Well, right here, of course. Ochako almost leapt at that.
She almost dove right onto the bed, but her last remaining defense, her brain, held her back, even while her body and heart screamed.
To Deku, it wouldn't be, we can't just share we shouldn't. Izuku looked really confused, shouldn't what? We can't just sleep together. Ochako finally forced the words out.
Her brain, digging them up and shoving them out of her mouth.
Even though she didn't want to say them. Izuku sat up, his legs hanging off the end of the bed, feet dangling just off the floor. Why? With just a single word, Izuku threw Ochako's thoughts into utter chaos. Why? How can he just ask that? He has to know this isn't proper. That's right. Sharing a bed with someone like this, this is something lovers do. Ochako slapped her hand over her mouth. That was not what she had intended to say. Not in the slightest. She was ready to go over proper etiquette between boys and girls at their age. Come at the issue logically. Surely Izuku was just thinking along the lines of sleepovers you had as little kids. Even if you weren't the same gender, it was fine to lay about in the same bed. Nothing was going to happen. Now, though, anything could happen.
And going off how excited she could feel herself get at just what anything meant, her getting into that bed was a very bad idea. It was a step too far. There would be no going back. Only lovers, Izuku trailed off, looking away. Ochako nodded vigorously, why that's right. Here it comes, he'll start sputtering and freaking out. I need to make sure he doesn't think he crossed a line or anything. Does that mean you don't love me? Everything stopped. Everything except the thundering of Ochako's heart which. Her brain couldn't understand what Izuku had just asked, looking up at her with his big green eyes and blushing red cheeks. Ochako could not believe the question she had just been asked. There was no way she had heard right. Izuku did not just ask her if she didn't love him. Why would he ask that? Why did he look so sad when he asked that? With her brain so flummoxed, her heart took over. Deku, why would you ask me that? I mean, I thought it was obvious, Uraraka, the look of adoration, the blush that spread all the way down his neck. Ochako held her breath, not sure if she was ready for the answer, I love you, Uraraka. Ochako knew she needed to remain calm. She needed to think this through before she said or did anything. Her brain was screaming at her to slow down and think, but when Izuku reached out a hand towards her, beckoning her to join him, Ochako's heart drop-kicked her brain out of the room and her hormones locked the door. There was no more waiting. No more thinking. Just action. Ochako dove into Izuku's arms and pressed her lips against his, kissing him. The first kiss was more a mashing of lips. The next kiss was more of the same. The next and the next after that, they got better. More controlled and at the same time more passionate. Soon she wasn't just kissing Izuku's lips, but his cheeks too, peppering each and every freckle she could with her lips. Izuku fell backwards, pulling Ochako with him so she lay on top of him. Her arms unwrapped themselves from his neck and sought out his hands. Fingers soon interlocked and Ochako cooed in joy. I love you. In between each kiss she screamed her feeling out, I love you, I love you. Ochako went back for Izuku's lips, now wet, swollen, and hot. They were begging for more kisses. Deeper kisses. With her lips against his, Ochako opened her mouth just a little and let her tongue slip out, brushing against Izuku's mouth. Asking, begging to be let in. With a moan, Izuku's lips parted, and dove in. It was a sloppy kiss, neither one really knowing what to do, but neither caring. They let their bodies move however they wanted, tongues brushing and dancing around each other until Ochako pulled back and took a moment to catch her breath. Her brain was banging on the door, screaming that she needed to slow down. She needed to get back in control. Righting herself, she let her legs fall on either side of Izuku's waist until she was sitting up.
Control. Yes, that was important here.
It was until Izuku pushed his hips up, and Ochako felt him. Felt his heat and hardness against herself and heard him moan in need as they grinded together, her own hips rocking against his. Suddenly, control was the least important thing.
What became important was that she wanted more.
She wanted more kisses. She wanted to feel more, and she wanted to taste more, and she wanted to see more.
And the quickest way to get that was getting rid of Izuku's stupid shirt. Taking her hands away from Izuku's, Ochako fumbled with Izuku's tie, careful as she pulled at it. She didn't want to accidentally strangle him. Finally, the knot was undone and Ochako pulled it away.
Then her fingers reached for the buttons. The first two at the collar fought her, denying Ochako her goal, but she triumphed in the end and got them undone.
But it had taken too long. Gripping the shirt, Ochako ripped it open, sending buttons skipping along the floor. Next was the white undershirt.
Thin cotton was no match for Ochako as she grabbed it at the collar and made sure she looked Izuku in the eye, so she could see the same wanton desire she had in hers, and tore it apart. Finally, there in front of her were the muscles she wanted to touch and taste.
So with eyes twinkling with desire and mischief, Ochako licked her lips and dove in, attacking Izuku's exposed neck and collar, sucking at his skin, and letting her teeth gently scrape against him. With each suck and bite, she marked Izuku up.
Marked him as hers. Izuku was hers, and she was going to make sure the world knew it. Working her way down, Izuku moaned her name with each fresh mark. With her mouth pressed against his chest, Ochako moved to the side and wrapped her lips around a nipple, tugging on it and letting her tongue tickle and dance around the sensitive nub.
Oh! Oh, Uraraka!
That voice, that wonderful voice stirred her up more than she could have ever known. Hearing him say her name like that was like throwing fuel on the fire. Pulling back, she smiled up at Izuku, before moving over and doing the exact same thing to the other side, making him whimper, moan, and writhe under her. But turnabout's fair play, and with a buck of his hip, Ochako was jolted back upright and Izuku moved his hands to the hem of her shirt, still tucked into her skirt, pulling on it, but not taking it off. He looked up at her, searching for permission.
Want to get rid of this? Izuku nodded hugely and Ochako laughed. Then take it off, silly. Ochako was impressed that Izuku didn't follow her lead and ripped the shirt off her body.
She was also grateful, too, she didn't want to have to explain why she needed a new one.
With great concentration, Izuku worked on each and every button, his fingers showing off a dexterity her own had lacked.
With the last button opened, Izuku pulled the shirt open and Ochako let her arms hang to her sides, so it fell off, leaving her in a simple pink bra. Izuku's eyes went wide as he took her in, oh wow. Ochako giggled and leaned forward a bit, giving Izuku a much better look at her cleavage.
You like? Izuku's head was a blur as he nodded, making Ochako lean back and laugh.
Izuku paid close attention to how each laugh made her chest go up and down. Once she had herself under control, she crooked her finger at Izuku, beckoning him towards her. Come on, Deku.
Don't you want to turn, too?
Sitting up and keeping Ochako in his lap, Izuku attacked Ochako's neck, sucking hard on the skin as he returned the favor for each and every mark she had left on him.
Ochako didn't mind, though, she wanted it. Welcomed it.
Izuku's mouth on her felt so good. Keeping his mouth attacking her neck and collarbone, Izuku's hands snuck around Ochako back, looking for the strap of her bra. When they brushed up against the pink fabric, Ochako felt her heart start to beat even faster.
Soon, Izuku was going to expose her.
The thought was intoxicating. After a few seconds of fumbling, Izuku pulled his mouth off her skin and leaned over her shoulder, a look of concentration on his face. He even had his tongue peeking out from his lips. Ochako let her forehead rest on his shoulder, laughing at his troubles. Do you want help, Deku?
Izuku growled, I'm gonna get this. Finally, Izuku got his fingers on the clasp and Ochako felt the pressure on her chest immediately lessen. Got it. Izuku cheered in triumph while Ochako broke into another fit of laughter. After fighting back more giggles, Ochako leaned back. Her bra now just hanging off her breasts. Congratulations, Deku. So, she glanced down and winked, want to get you prize?
With shaking hands, Izuku wrapped his fingers around the straps and pulled.
End of mild lemon. Beep. 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 Beep.
Ochako's eyes snapped open as she gasped desperately for air. With her alarm clock ringing harshly beside her, Ochako lay sprawled out in her bed, dripping with sweat and very, very alone. Mitten-covered hands swept at the sheets as she tried to find where Izuku was. It was only after she couldn't find him anywhere that her mind finally broke through her dream haze and reminded her exactly what had happened last night. They had made it to the Midoriyas and Ochako had helped get Izuku into his bed. Once his head hit his pillow, he was out and dead to the world. After that, she had said her goodbyes to her parents at the train station and returned to her own apartment where she also promptly went to bed with the night sky being clear and speckled with dazzling stars.
Izuku had not come with her.
He had been too tired to do anything but go to sleep. He physically couldn't go with her, even if he had tried, much less walk her home and do. Ochako covered her face with her hands and screamed as everything fell into place and her dream hit her. Her frustration turned towards her blaring alarm clock.
The horrible beeping still ringing out into her room. Mocking her. Laughing at her.
Laughing because it had ripped her away from her fantasy. Without caring at all, Ochako ripped her mittens off and smashed her fist down on the 100-yen clock, cracking the plastic and silencing it forever. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 26.
If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.